They're going live, going live, going. And we're live. Hello, folks. You can hear me out there. Just popped on a wee moment early just to make sure everything's working okay as usual. Pardon me. Oh, and there's Babs. We comment in the chat saying I might be in a bit late, but I'll be here for sure. No worries, Babs. Thanks for the wee comment. Always good to see you. Let me switch that over to live chat. Yes, indeed. Sorry, I'm just getting myself organised, folks. My rubbish seat is deflating on me as always. Seem to keep getting smaller. And let me just turn that off. Oh, hang on. It would not be good if that was going off in the middle of things. Apologies. There we are. In fact, I'm just going to throw it. Sorry, give me 1 second. I'll throw this out of here. I don't want any other phones going off. There we are. Apologies. Sorry about that. Anyway, there's 9 o'clock. I suppose it was worth coming on early because we're so badly organised. But I'd like to say hello to everybody who's joining me for our Dune Messiah book club here on Doc Sloan's science fiction station at the Doghouse, as we like to call it. And we're hitting chapter 10 tonight. So thank you all for joining me. If there's anybody out there, say hello. There's lots and lots of Dune stuff in the ether at the moment. And I think just before popping online there, I think I saw that the London premiere was going on there in, obviously in London. There's Cynthia saying, hi Doc, hi all, hi Cynthia. Thanks very much for joining us. I hope you're enjoying your wee break with your family. So yeah, it's all a go-go, I suppose. 15th of February, the Ides of February. I think the Ides of February will be the 14th maybe, but there's lots of stuff, but all sorts of wee things popping up on YouTube, etc., full of conversation and chat about the film, and I suppose we're seeing lots and lots of interviews and the buttering up, as I like to call it, of the movie and everybody who has something to do with it. It's an awful lot of self-adulation and praise, isn't it? But I suppose movies are like that. Sorry about this, folks. I'm trying to get myself organised here. But there we go. That's a bit better. The place is still a mess, as you can probably tell. Still trying to get sorted here. But we've got chapter 10 tonight, I suppose, in light of the previous chapter, is a really heavy, really dialogue-heavy chapter. And there's a few things to consider in it. Pardon me. Because it's dialogue-heavy, I end up writing quite a lot of notes because I basically have to have the dialogue correct. So I almost end up with a little script here. But it's we're going to see a sort of conversation between Alia and Hayt in this chapter. And it's kind of framed a bit around the investigation that they're on of this woman's body in the desert. Excuse me. Pardon me. And it almost seems to, how would I put it? The murder investigation almost just seems to be something in the way here. Or maybe that's not the best way of putting it, but it's kind of tertiary to what's going on in the chapter, I suppose. So we'll actually spend very, very little time at a crime scene at the beginning, and we'll have a kind of revert back, some thoughts back at the end of the chapter on what's going on here with this crime. I actually thought tonight might be a good time to dig out our old friend. Let's just see. Will it be the time that you want a single particular book and you can't find it? There we go. There's our good friend Apollodorus. I shall possibly grab I really need to organise my books, don't I? Robert Graves. Goodness, it's a bad set of affairs if I can't find my Robert Graves books. We'll pick them up. But I thought just today in particular, we're going to be dealing with a bit of this later with Paul Atreides, but particularly with Alia, I suppose we've been talking about the mythological overlays that Frank Herbert puts into Dune and into the whole Dune series. There we go. 105 to 107. And the one that really comes to the fore in this book, there we go. Laius and Oedipus is Oedipus. who we'll have a wee bit of a chat about today. But I ended up thinking about Oedipus quite a bit today, and the funny thing is that I'm always focusing on Paul Atreides in relation to that myth. And in all honesty, sometimes I need to slap myself about the face a wee bit, and that we really need to consider Alia within the same myth. And this chapter, I think, will give us some information on that. But just in terms of the Oedipus myth, and we're going to get a little bit of knowledge. I'll discuss it when we get there. But we're going to get a little bit of knowledge from Alia about how she knows her mother and father, which is, of course, very Oedipal. And we have this kind of back and forth going between her and the Gola Hayt. There's a point, I suppose, where some of his Zensunni responses, she criticizes him for speaking in riddles, and that made me think of the riddle of the Sphinx. So we're going to have a wee chat today, hopefully when we get there, about Oedipus and the Oedipus myth in relation to Dune Messiah. And I'll need to grab one more book off the bookshelf, actually. Bear with me a wee second, folks. There's Carlos Cresselia saying, hey, guys. Hi, Carlos. Thank you very much for joining us. And that book, of course, is going to be Lord Raglan's, isn't it? Which I do know where that is. There you go, the hero. Very quick look for. Can I spot my graves? Is there something hiding behind it? It's ridiculous. Books I use more probably than any other. I have no idea what I've done with it. I'll not waste anybody's time trying to find it. But simply put, Paul Atreides goes through. I suppose we have these 22 ritualistic steps that Lord Raglan describes in relation to what most heroes go through, and his archetype for that, if you like. And the only person that scores full marks within Lord Raglan's system is Oedipus. So we've got a little bit here on Oedipus from Lord Raglan, and we'll have a wee chat about what it says about Oedipus within Theban mythology. We've got him right here from Apollodorus. And so we'll have a wee natter about that whenever we get there. Carlos is saying Herbert never really made clear what degree of prescience Alia had, but we do know she had it. Yes. Well, we'll see a little bit of that in this chapter. After the kiss, I think, which is I don't know, it's a nice enough moment, I suppose. It's quite a funny wee moment. Within this chapter, I suppose we've got Alia going, kind of trying to be the analytical, isn't she? But within the nature of the mystery of the crime. But there's this little bit where, the kiss, his lips had been flesh of a future she'd seen in some prescient byway. Still, it's got me thinking a lot about this, Carlos, as we were saying. You know, the idea of looking forward and vision, in particular. And we're going to get to an awful lot of that stuff. But the whole point of the Kwisatz Haderach, I suppose, along with having the abilities of a mentat, is to look back, isn't it, into the male genetic line. And I suppose the other interesting thing is that the Kwisatz Haderach, you get the impression it's meant to be a man, but you kind of wonder why the Bene Gesserit don't breed for a woman who can see the male line. And it's quite possible that that's what we have in Alia. And I suppose it brings into the question, what is an abomination? When we get down to it, you know. But it's an interesting enough wee chapter. It's dialogue heavy, so I'll be reading lots of dialogue for this one, and we'll probably move through it quite quickly because of that. But I will start off with the epigraph anyway. Epigraph number 10. I quite like this one, and our epigraph for chapter 10 is an epigram. So there we go. So here lies a toppled god. His fall was not a small one. We did but build his pedestal, a narrow and a high one. And we're told this is a Tleilaxu epigram. So epigraphs and epigrams, if anyone's not too sure, epigraphs are what we have at the start of these chapters, and epigrams are witty little little saying or something like that, such as this. Phrased in a clever manner, that sort of thing. So there we go. And I've just kind of done almost a little, at the start here, a little kind of cinema reel, just for a bit of fun up here with Alia and Hayt. Alia loves Hayt. This kind of thing. So let's have a wee look. Let's just get my copy of the book. There we go. I'll get things organized. And I actually have just telling my wife the other day, of all the different drugs I've tried in my life and given up, that the one that I haven't been able to give up is coffee. And I've packed it in for a while, but I really do need a cup of coffee now and then just to help me stay awake. So mainly decaf, but the occasional cup of full blast, Joe. Right, let's have a wee look. And oh yes, I was going to comment, even my copy of the book's not doing too well. I've got a split already. God, I hate cheap glue. Right, here we go, folks. Alia crouched, resting elbows on knees, chin on fists, stared at the body on the dune, a few bones and some tattered flesh that once had been a young woman. The hands, the head, most of the upper torso were gone, eaten by the Coriolis wind. The sand all around her bore the tracks of her brother's medics and questers. They were gone now, all excepting the mortuary attendants, who stood to one side with Hayt the Ghola, waiting for her to finish her mysterious perusal of what had been written here. And we're told a wheat-coloured sky enfolded the scene in glaucous light common to mid-afternoon for these latitudes. And here we have the body and a description of it. So we're told the body has been discovered several hours earlier by a low-flying courier whose instruments had detected a faint trace of water, where none should be. Must be pretty sensitive. His call had brought the experts, and they had learned what? Okay, here we go. 1, that this had been a woman. 2, about 20 years of age. 3, she's a Fremen. D, she's addicted to Samuta. And 4, 5, she had died here in the crucible of the desert. 6, from the effects of a subtle poison. 7, of Tleilaxu origin. So, it's kind of almost a bit like a detective novel, this bit. So to die in the desert, we're told, is a common enough occurrence, but a Fremen addicted to Samuta, that was such a rarity that Paul had sent her to examine the scene in the ways their mother had taught them. In other words, by using Bene Gesserit skills. So the idea of drug addiction being rare with the Fremen. And I'm wondering, is that rare as in the past, if you see what I mean? Prior to Paul Atreides' arrival, is it a thing that I suppose Fremen on drugs, this kind of thing, is it a thing that's happened since Paul's emperorship, if you like? So they found a body, no head, no hands, all the things that might identify someone, and most of the upper torso gone. But the thing about it is that this person was addicted to Samuta. Such a rarity that Paul had sent her to examine the scene the way his mother had taught. So Alia, we're told, felt that she'd accomplished nothing here except to cast her own aura of mystery about a scene that was already mysterious enough. She heard the Ghola's feet stir the sand, looked at him. His attention rested momentarily upon the escort thopters circling overhead like a flock of ravens. And we have this little phrase here, and just to repeat it from the previous chapter, let me just quickly have a wee nosy here, if I can run back. There we go. Let me see. So in the previous chapter, we had Paul quite early on saying, isn't there a warning against guildsmen bearing gifts? Pardon me. And of course, we said it's Timeo Daneus et Dona Ferentes, which is beware of Danans bearing gifts. So we get this repeat of this again. Beware of the guild bearing gifts, Alia thought. And this time, I suppose her thoughts are directed at Hayt. He is the gift that we should be aware of. Cynthia is saying, here, hang on. Carlos Cristales says, that's a good point, Carlos. I hadn't thought of that. Very good. Carlos says it's because they're already addicted to spice. Question. That's a very good That's a very good point, considering that we know a little bit about melange and what it does, and in terms of, I suppose, how it affects other drugs. Isn't that right? If I understand, if the Bene Gesserit, there are other drugs that they can achieve the process of becoming a Reverend Mother. But if you take melange, they cease to be effective, if I remember correctly. But it's a good question. Samut is the music drug, isn't it? That Nephid is, well, I think it seems everybody's addicted to it. It seems to be that kind of nature. But that's the drug that we see in Dune. That Nephid, the Baron's main henchman, if you like, is addicted to. It's kind of interesting, I suppose, Samuda, but music does. Certain drugs do affect music, if you see what I mean. If you've ever, I don't know if anybody's ever, not that I'm advocating such a thing, but if anybody's ever taken hallucinogenics, such as like LSD or something, you can see music, you can smell it, you can do all sorts of things. But music is kind of interesting, I think. Excuse me a wee second. Certainly, playing music's a bit different if you've I suppose, if you've taken drugs. But the association of this drug with music's, I think, quite interesting. Still looking forward to some point. We'll have to do one of my things on my Doghouse science fiction station, things that we were meant to do last year but couldn't. But I was hoping to do a episode on science fiction drugs. There's quite a few in this book, quite a few from Philip K. Dick. Yeah, there's loads, all sorts. So beware of the guild-bearing gifts, Alia thought. Oh, sorry, I had another comment there to read. Cynthia was saying, interesting that she died of Samuta. Interesting that she died of Samuta, not one of Skytail's darts or the desert hurt itself. Emphasis on Tleilaxu poison here. Remember chapter 1 with the discussion of psychic poisons. She died here in the hang on. Interesting that she died of Samuta. I don't think she does. Cynthia, I think, if we jump a little bit ahead, we get the name of the poison. Let me see. Hang on. Sorry, I've jumped chapters here. The fact that the Fremen is addicted to Samuta was the rarity that Paul had sent. She had died here in the crucible of the desert from the effects of a subtle poison of Tleilaxu origin. We'll get to it in a wee second. It's called the Throat of Hell. But the other thing is, I kind of get the confusion. I think I'm a bit confused about it. It says that she died here. I don't think we're going to get too much more information about the Throat of Hell, but goodness, we're going back a bit, aren't we? Let me see. Synesthesia. Hang on. Remember the chapter 1, the discussion of the psychic poison. But see, I don't. Oh goodness. Right, here we go. Let's go have a look. Chapter 1. Yeah, I suppose it's the thing with I got it that she got a dart, didn't she? But I don't think she's dead at that point. And I think he takes the body out, and that she dies there eventually. Psychic poison. Where are we? I must have that one big. Chapter 2, chapter 1's not very. Let me see if I can find this here. Spice withdrawal is fatal. I kind of, psychic poison. No, I'm not finding it. I don't want to. Sorry, I'll have a wee think about it. Let me see if. I think that's the case, Cynthia. Sorry, Carlos, I'll get your quick comment. I think we've got, yeah, the drug itself is what is her addiction. Let me see, where did we get? Right, that's chapter 1, chapter 2. Psychic poisons in chapter 2. Sorry, it's probably because I've done a kind of prologue chapter 1. Of course, they don't have chapters. Sorry, Cynthia. Let me see. Psychic poison. The argument about psychic poison. Going back a bit. Or maybe it isn't psychic in chapter 1. It's just they're continuing on with that. Let me see. Going for some time now was energetic and vehement, light and blindly compulsive. Close to double second. Very easy to, Oh goodness, there's my doggies going at outside, folks. Apologies. No, it's I think yeah, the poison here is she is an addict to Sumuda. But the poison here is called, what was it, the throat of death or something? Well, right, sorry, I gotta go way forward here. But yeah, we hadn't got to it just yet. I think the fact is that the addiction is possibly a thing that leads to, part of the decline, if you like. There, within the Fremen there's a phrase for it coming up actually. Goodness. Well, I'm jumping way ahead. I'll see if I can remember when I get to it, guys. Discussion of psychic poison. I kind of thought that the psychic poisons, I'm not remembering probably correctly because I haven't found it, and I'll probably try and read through this for the next time. Magical history, psychic chemistry, melange without melange. I kind of thought that was something like the Dune tarot was one of the psychic poisons, if you like. Poison for the soul. Oh, right, hang on, you're helping me out here, Cynthia. Earlier in chapter 1, Edric says we're discussing psychic poison, not a physical one. Not many details here, just a link. Yeah. I know. Yeah, I've got a prologue on chapter 1. That's the problem. Chapter 2 is kind of, I think, where we're talking about different. Somebody was asking me about different editions there actually earlier today. Let's see. That shouldn't be too hard to find. Poison. We're discussing psychic. Yes, find it. Thank you. Thanks, Cynthia. That makes sense. Everything you put on psychic. Give her enough time to complete assessment. Said poison. He uttered the word with the atonals, which said he alone understood its secret meaning. I'm going to back up, I think. We're discussing psychic poison, not a physical one. Not with their attention, Edric, silent rage, etc. Pair of Bene Tleilax trained in all their subtle ways have not learned the true uses of deception, etc. I think the psychic poison there is possibly I'll have to have a think about it, but I thought the psychic poison was the Dune tarot. But I might be completely wrong. It's one of those things as we move forward in the book, don't we? It's a wee bit hard to remember. But yeah, no, it's not Sumuda that kills her. She's a Sumuda addict. I think it's probably the addiction to Sumuda that makes her vulnerable, I suppose, to the conspiracy. Because it seems to be one of those drugs where you're away, if you know, quite a bit away. Though Nafid seems to be able to manage himself in Dune. Let me see. It's backing up. And Carlos was saying, don't most drugs achieve the effects by causing different forms or degrees of synesthesia? I think so, yeah. I would say not all of them do it. I remember a long, long time ago when I was young, I played guitar, and a friend sort of, if you were smoking a joint, what was it he told you? It's a trick. If you get someone who's playing guitar, to plug your ears and close your eyes and bite down on the guitar, on the head, and let someone play it for you. And the resonation through your head is incredible. It's if nobody's ever tried it, give it a go. I said, I dare say you wouldn't need a smoke or a joint for it anyway, but it's an interesting experience, you know. Carlos is saying I was always interpreted psychic poison as eroding will and resolve. Yeah, that's a good point. And just muddying things, I thought as well. But psychic, you know, do we go with the soul or the mind? But yeah, so it is an interesting thing, the fact that as you pointed out there, that that all of the Fremen are addicted to spice. So it's just that the fact that they're addicted to something else. You know, why be addicted to a second-rate drug when you can have, you know, melange? I don't I don't know. It's interesting that Samut is a musical kind of drug. Hmm. A Fremen, where are we? To die in the desert was common enough. Is that where I got? No, sorry, I got to beware of the guild bearing gifts. Alia thought. So Thopter's scenes, let's see. So Thopter's, the mortuary Thopter and her own craft stood on the sand near a rock outcropping behind the Gola. Focusing on the grounded Thopters filled Alia with a craving to be airborne and away from here. But we're told that Paul had thought she might see something here which others might miss. She squirmed in her still suit. It felt raspingly unfamiliar after all the suitless months of city life. She studied the Gola, wondering if he might know something important about this peculiar death. A lock of his black goat hair, she saw, had escaped his stillsuit hood. She sensed her hand longing to tuck that hair back into place. So Alia is definitely getting, you know, I think her feelings for Hayt are being developed quite well here in this. I think there's I think a level of denial, I think, about it. So as though lured by this thought, his gleaming grey metal eyes turned toward her. The eyes set her trembling, is that word again, and she tore her gaze away from him. The throat of hell. Now here we go. This is the poison. A Fremen woman had died here from a poison called the throat of hell. Lovely name. And a Fremen addicted to Samuta. She shared Paul's disquiet at this conjunction. Pardon me. There's Babs saying, howdy Doc, evening y'all. Howdy Babs, thanks very much for joining us. Lovely to have you here as always. We're only at the start really, I suppose. We're having a bit of a natter about poisons and drugs. I think I've got a big misprint coming up here, folks. Maybe you can help me because the misprint is no such word. And I need to find a pen to fix this, but I'm pretty sure you can tell me if you've got a misprint in it or not. So this is just after beware of the guild bearing gifts. So the mortuary attendants waited patiently. This corpse contained not enough water for them to salvage, but enough for the courier to pick up with his instruments, I suppose. They felt no need to hurry, and they believed that Alia through some... Now, I've got the word cryptic written here, and I'm pretty sure that this is cryptic. In fact, it has to be, because there's no such word as cryptic. And I did look, just in case it was outside of my vocabulary. I'm just wondering if you have cryptic there as well. No, sorry, I don't have cryptic. I've got glyptic. And that's definitely not a word either. I have glyptic art. Let's have a look. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I've got glyptic. Oh, there we go. Cryptic. It is glyptic. There we are. It's not a misprint. It's a misprint in my book. Hang on, where are we? I'll just fix this. There you go. I thought it was cryptic. It is glyptic. I've got gryptic. Yep. Glip. That's what I was wondering. There we go. That makes it. I thought it was cryptic. Though through some glyptic art was reading a strange truth in the remains. Glyptic is of or conserving carving or engraving. That makes no sense at all. The art or process of carving or engraving, especially on gems. Yeah, from the Greek graphein, to carve. Yes, Greek, glyptic, French, glypticos, glyptic. Where are we from? Yeah, I don't know. I think misprint anyway. Was reading a strange truth in these remains. I think it should be cryptic. I genuinely think that. Over concerning carving or engraving. I suppose you could read it that way, maybe. What's she reading that's carved or engraved in this body? But I wouldn't see that makes any sense at all. I don't know what you guys think. I'm just going to leave a question mark with it. Cryptic, the fact that she's mysterious. Cryptic would be hidden. Through some hidden art was reading a strange truth in these remains. That makes a lot more sense to me than through some, if we substitute the word there, through some, of relation art concerning carving or engraving. So it's just, I don't know. Even ecliptic to read the sands of bones. Yeah, I'm trying to go there. I said I've got a misprint here anyway. So either way, I was damned if I did or damned if I didn't. Glyptic is a word. Gryptic is certainly not a word. All right. GLYP. There I go. Fix me book while I'm at it. I'll go with glyptic for now, but I honestly think that it doesn't. I would go with cryptic. I was reading this. Some glyptic art. I don't know. One of those, I think. I'll put it this way: we'll not worry about it too much. But I still think cryptic would make more sense. We're told that no strange truth came to her, though. So regardless of what the mortuary attendants think, there's no art that's seemingly bringing up this truth from these remains. We're told there was only a distant feeling of anger deep within her, the obvious thoughts in the attendants' minds. It was a product of that damned religious mystery. See, again, that still would make me think cryptic would make more sense there. Product. And here we go. Here's quite an interesting thing here. By the way, I think Alia's main emotion throughout this is anger. This is the chapter where I suppose it kind of shook me a little bit that as much as I've been looking at her character and considering her character, separate from Paul, what I'd forgotten to do, and this is the chapter that kind of reminded me to do it, is that I need to take these two characters and put them back to back. They're a Janus aspect. They're one and the same person in some ways. And that was kind of one of the ideas that I wanted to put into your heads, maybe, is that Alia is also a hero at a different point in the hero quest, if you like, or the hero's path, for want of a better word. And I'm not talking about the monomyth, but certainly in where they should be. And particularly in this chapter, I think we're going to get a very, very strong Oedipal overlay onto Paul Atreides. But within this chapter, I think we get almost more of it, if you like, in a very subtle way on Alia. There was only a distant feeling of anger deep within her at the obvious thought in the attendants' minds. It was a product of that damn religious mystery. And what is that obvious thought? They think that she has some special means of, revealing the truth. She and her brother could not be people. They had to be something more. The Bene Gesserit had seen to that by manipulating Atreides' ancestry. Their mother had contributed to it by thrusting them onto the path of witchery. And Paul perpetuated the difference. That's an interesting thing. So the Bene Gesserit have been manipulating the ancestry on one hand, their mother bringing in this the witchery, if you like, the Bene Gesserit teaching. But within the difference of the two is Paul, if you like, and he perpetuates there. The Reverend Mother, encapsulated in Alia's memories, stirred restlessly, provoking Adab flashes of thought. And here's this piece, little one. You are what you are. There are compensations. And we get this from Alia, I suppose, in her thoughts. Compensations. We've slipped into your mind a little bit here. Just before we go forward, I had a question myself, and again, I wonder what you guys think here. The Reverend Mother encapsulated in Alia's memories, stirred restlessly. And I was wondering, who or what is that? Is it Jessica? Which would make sense. Or is it some kind of composite kind of Reverend Mother, if you see what I mean? Almost as if all the Reverend Mothers within other memories speaking like in one voice, if you see what I mean. It does sound more like Jessica, though. It just says the Reverend Mother encapsulated in Alia's memories stirred restlessly, provoking Adab flashes of thought. Peace, little one, you are what you are. There are compensations. And I think some of that, there's a little bit more of the Atreides Scions or Scions blame game, if you like, that goes on in this book. That they'll blame us for this, so people will say this, etc. But there's a little bit of blame being aimed there from Alia at both the Bene Gesserit and her mother, and in a funny little, in a little bit of a way, Paul as well, I think. But I wonder what you think. Do you think that's Jessica speaking there? Peace, little one. You're what you are. There are compensations. This little one. It's I suppose it's an interesting way of putting it. We're told she summoned the Gola with a gesture, and he stopped beside her, attentive, patient. What do you see in it? What do you see in this? She asked. And his response is I'll sort out my tenses in a second, folks. Sorry about that. His response is, we may never learn who it was died here. The head, the teeth are gone. The hands, unlikely such a one had a genetic record somewhere to which her cells could be matched. So not likely that they can match up DNA, etc. Tleilaxu poison, says Alia. What do you make of that? And many people buy such poisons. True enough. And this flesh is too far gone to be regrown, as was done with your body. So she's lining up kind of, she's bringing in, I suppose, parts of this crime scene in a way to sort of challenge and talk to Hayt here, to find out a little bit about him. And I'd say that the fact that it's a Tleilaxu poison, he's a made by the Tleilaxu, although he's a guild gift, is probably putting her a bit wary here. It says, even if you could trust the Tleilaxu to do it, he said. She nodded and stood. You will fly me back to the city now. And that's basically where we exit this scene, this crime scene. We're told that when they were airborne and pointed north, that she said, you fly exactly as Duncan Idaho did. And he cast a speculative glance at her. Others have told you this. Because again, how would she know? That's a good question. What are you thinking now? Ali asks him. Many things. Stop dodging the question, damn you. Which question? And she glared at him, and he saw the glare and shrugged. So again, just like the previous chapter, I suppose there's a lot of verbal fencing here. And it's not quite direct, and some of it is and some of it isn't, I suppose. Let's see. So Alia's thoughts here are how like Duncan Idaho that gesture, that shrug, she thought, accusingly, her voice thick and with a catch in it. She said, I merely wanted your reactions voice to play my own thoughts against them. That young woman's death bothers me. Pardon me. And this will keep bugging Ali, I suppose, that it's not going to disappear. So here it says, I was not thinking about that. What were you thinking about? And he says, about the strange emotions I feel when people speak of the one I may have been. May have been? The Tleilaxu are very clever. Not that clever. You were Duncan Idaho. I always think there's a double joke. There's a double meaning in there, a subtle joke. Very likely. It's the prime computation, he says. So you get emotional. And here it says, to a degree, I feel eagerness. I'm uneasy. There's a tendency to tremble, and I must devote to control. Hang on a second. Sorry, folks. My handwriting's beating me here. To a degree, I feel eagerness. I'm uneasy. Oh, it's not my handwriting. It's just the way it's written. So there's a tendency to tremble, and I must devote effort to controlling it. I get flashes of imagery. I suppose trembling, a tendency to tremble, and it's also the word that we get with kind of Alia, isn't it? This trembling sensation. So he's eager, he feels keen to get on with things, he's uneasy, his tendency to tremble, and must devote to controlling it. Effort, that's my problem. There you go. I've left out a word. Must devote effort to controlling it. I get flashes of imagery. What imagery? It's too rapid to recognize. Flashes, spasms, almost memories. Aren't you curious about such memories? And here it says, of course, curiosity urges me forward, but I move against a heavy reluctance. I think, what if I'm not the one they believe me to be? I don't like that thought. And I think that's a very important thought here. We were talking about psychic poison. And I suppose the old brain's kicking in a bit, Carlos, but in a funny way, isn't that what hate is meant to be as well? And I think this in particular, what if I'm not the one they believe me to be? And that's as much as that's Hate's personal thoughts. Is that aimed at Alia and Paul, in a sense? Is this kind of more of that psychic poison? What if Alia and Paul are not the ones that we believe them to be? And I don't like that thought. And again, I just think there's something subtle there. Which I think it's almost a comment overall on the kind of messianic impulse, if you like. It's a very little subtle thing, and I think that's what that's about there. And it's not about hate, if you see what I mean. It's tricky trying to decipher Frank Herbert's writing, isn't it, sometimes? Alia says, and this is all you were thinking? And he says, you know better than that, Alia. So he's being a little bit informal, and she's off she goes with the anger. And this is her thoughts. How dare he use my given name? She felt anger rise and go down beneath the memory of the way he'd spoken. Softly, throbbing undertones, casual male confidence, a muscle twitched along her jaw. She clenched her teeth. So we have Hate saying here then, and again, I suppose dodging there's a bit of dodging the issue here. We really do have Alia's kind of sort of romantic feelings rising to the fore here. In the middle of this investigation, I think it's quite funny. Cynthia was saying, I read this as the attendance thing, that Alia had more powers than she really does, even a glyptic to read the sand and bones. Yeah, again, the mystery of her. They believe that Alia, through some glyptic art, we'll go with that. Who am I to rewrite, Frank? I still think it doesn't make sense. Was reading a strange truth in the remains, yeah. But it makes her angry, the obvious thoughts in their minds as a product of the damned religious mystery. So it's their own fault, I suppose, ultimately. The Atreides do cultivate this, don't they? And then I suppose they're getting miffed when people take them seriously. Carlos is saying, Hate Idaho brings up the question of nature versus nurture. How much of the original is present before memory recovery? Yeah, that's a good point. There was even a bit, and I actually left it in my notes, Carlos. I'll tell you when I get there, which is where I wrote down Duncan. As I'm doing these wee scripts, if you see what I mean. There's Hayt, and there's Alia, and there's Hayt, and that's the way I've been writing it. And I just thought it was quite interesting what you say there now, because at a certain point I'd forgotten that he was Hayt, and I actually wrote down his character name was Duncan, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. I wonder why I did that. And then I wrote Hayt above it, so I've actually got Hayt Duncan as a double-barreled note in this chapter, and it's kind of at the point where I started. I'd forgotten. Does that make sense? I think it's an interesting thing. Nature and nurture. How much of the original is present? Well, it seems to be ultimately all of it, or most of it. I think it's at this stage, I suppose. Oh dear. You all right, girlies? Sorry about the barking, folks. We've got the two girls sitting out in the hall there. Pardon me. Oh. I suppose it makes the idea of the Hate Idaho character quite interesting, because we know the original, and what you're saying, Carl, is how much of the original is present before memory recovery, or even other glimpses of memory, that there's little bits. But he's a bit like a blank page in some ways, isn't he, at the minute? Excuse me. Oh, goodness, hang on. Over the page I go. I'll just see where I got to, folks. Sorry about that. Oh, yes, they kind of exited. And she says, you fly exactly as Duncan Idaho did. Others have told you this, so you could. What are you thinking now? Many things. Stop dodging the question, damn you. Which question? Sorry, I did move forward a wee bit, didn't I? She glared at him, and he saw the glare and shrugged. So Alia's thoughts, how like Duncan Idaho, that gesture, she thought. Accusingly, her voice thick and with a catch in it, she said, I merely wanted your reactions voice to play my own thoughts against them. That young woman's death bothered me. Sorry, I have moved forward a bit, haven't I? I have found it. Sorry, I'll jump back to where we were. Or maybe I'm not too sure where we were. Hang on. I'll just go through it quickly, folks. Hang on. Oh, no, I have found it. We were talking, sorry about that. Of course, we were talking, curiosity urges me forward, but I move against a heavy reluctance. I think, what if I'm not the one they believe me to be? In other words, what if I'm not Duncan? I don't like that thought. And is this all you were thinking? You know better than that, Alia. How dare he use my given name? Anger rising, etc., etc. So she's he's getting to her a wee bit. He's poking at her a wee bit, I think. Hayt says, isn't that El Quds down there? He asked, dipping a wing briefly, causing a sudden flurry in their escort. Pardon me. So Alia, we're told, she looked down at their shadows rippling across the promontory above Harg Pass at the cliff and the rock pyramid containing the skull of her father. El Quds, the holy place. And Alia says, that's the holy place, she said. And Hayt says, I must visit that place one day, he said. Nearness to your father's remains may bring memories I can capture. So he's kind of looking for things to sort of, possibly jolt his memory. The closeness to Leto's remains would be one of them. El Quds, I had a wee look at this. El Quds is the Arabic name for Jerusalem, which I did not know. And it means the holy or holy sanctuary. So I've done a wee. I was reading away at that actually, just on Wikipedia. And I thought it was pretty interesting because there's a bit more to do with the etymology of Jerusalem. And here we go. Oh, hang on. Now, just very quickly. Oh, good. Off Wikipedia. Doesn't it work? Bear with me a second, folks. There we go. Etymology of names. That's what I'm looking for. Name Jerusalem is variously etymologized to mean foundation, from the city Uri to Eri, to found, to lay a cornerstone of the pagan god Shalem. That's the bit I find interesting. Never occurred to me. Jerusalem, yeah. The god Shalem is thus the original tutelary deity of the Bronze Age city. Shalem is a child of El, I believe, and Asherah. So there you go. That's kind of interesting. But El Quds, let me see if I can find that bit here. There we go. In Arabic, Jerusalem is mostly known as, transliterated as Al Quds, which is Al-Quds in English, meaning the holy or the holy sanctuary, cognate with Hebrew HaKodesh, if I'm probably butchering the pronunciation of this. Pardon me. The name is possibly a shortened form of Madin al-Quds, city of the holy sanctuary, after the Hebrew nickname with the same meaning. Lots of lots of stuff on Q is pronounced either with a voiceless ovular plosive, as in classical Arabic, or with a glottal stop, as in Levantine Arabic. So much I don't know about languages. But there you go. So, in terms of al-Quds, within Arabic, would be the holy or holy sanctuary. But there you go. So a little bit of word fun there. I think that's quite interesting. Excuse me. And yeah, so Alia, she saw suddenly how strong must be this need to know who he'd been. It was a central compulsion with him. She looked back at the rocks, the cliff with its base sloping into a dry beach and a sea of sand. Cinnamon rock lifting from the dunes like a ship breasting waves. More of those kind of water similes there, if you like, with the sand. Ship. Alia says, circle back. Hayt says, the escort. Alia says, they'll follow. Swing onto them. And he obeyed. Again, so this line of questioning from Alia, I suppose it's kind of, she is almost trying to be a detective here, and it is almost, I've likened the start and the end of this chapter to a wee bit of a kind of detective fiction, if you like. It's almost like Alia and Hayt are detectives. There you go. There's good team up for a procedural cop show. Oh dear, they get quite silly, don't they? Some of these. Yeah, I've actually got to the point where thinking about the buddy and cop shows, and as much as I enjoyed Lucifer, I just started to find that she was a cop and he was the devil. Together they solve crime. This kind of thing. It's gotten a bit silly, hasn't it? It's almost become a bad cliche. So, do you truly serve my brother? She asked when he was on the new course, the escort following. He says, I serve the Atreides. He said, tone formal. And she saw his right hand lift, fall, almost the old salute of Caladan, we're told. A pensive look over his face. There you go. At least we know it's not, slapping a weapon to the front of your head. I think I might have told you about this, folks, but you know this whole Dune, the TV, the saluting with a knife to your head kind of thing, I think is incredibly stupid. I've seen somebody do something similar with a hatchet and put a hatchet into their head, split themselves. Where was that? That was at the solar eclipse in Cornwall in 1999. One of the most stupidest things I've ever seen happen in my life. I had to say to the chap, I think you need to go to a hospital now. It was all right. It wasn't a deep gash, but it was very freaky. But there we go. A little Atreides, so it seems to be a little little kind of flip hand kind of thing. Right hand lift, fall. Um, I don't know. Almost the old salute of Caledon. It seems a little bit close to it, but there are lots of kind of salutes and things like that, aren't they? I was almost going to say it seems almost close to a little Nazi salute, a lazy one. The old salute of Caledon. A pensive look came over his face. She watched him peer down at the rock pyramid. What bothers you? She asked. His lips moved. A voice emerged, brittle, tight. He was, and a tear slid down his cheek. So, of course, giving water to the dead, as we all know, Alia found herself stilled by Fremen awe. He gave water to the dead compulsively. She touched a finger to his cheek and felt the tear. So there we go. She was wanting to tuck his hair in earlier. She's actually reached over and touched his cheek with a finger to feel the tear. And Alia says, "Duncan," she whispered. And he appeared locked to the Thopter's controls, gaze fastened to the tomb below. So they're doing this kind of flying over of this pyramid that houses Leto's skull. She raised her voice, "Duncan!" And he swallowed, shook his head, looked at her, the metal eyes glistening. This is Hayt, and this is the bit where I wrote Hayt Duncan, folks, just to show you. And I wondered, was it Alia that did it? For I didn't have that. I wrote Duncan the next time, and then I had to go, oh, hang on. And I thought that was I actually thought that was a testimony to the writing in the chapter and to the use of the characters. That for a moment he was back as Duncan to me, to the point where I wrote Duncan, and I hadn't written Duncan once. In terms of the character name as a place in the script, and I just thought it was an interesting little thing. So at that point in the book, to me, he was Hayt Duncan. That Duncan had come back a bit, to the point where I had written his name down, and I thought that's a good indicator, isn't it, as to how the character's moving, how Frank's writing the character. I felt an arm on my shoulders, he whispered. I felt it, an arm. His throat worked. It was a friend. It was my friend. Who? Asks Alia. I don't know. I think it was. I don't know. That made me laugh a wee bit, actually. I don't know if anybody ever used to read Ren and Stimpy comics. I didn't read too many of them, but I read a couple, and they did a rather good piss take of Spider-Man with another character. I think it's called Powdered Toast Man, but it's the bit where I don't know. It works quite well for William Shatner as well. It's the whole must stop talking in fragments, that kind of thing. I always find it kind of funny when I encounter it. But he felt an arm on his shoulders. He felt it, an arm. It was a friend. It was my friend. Who? I don't know. I think it was. I don't know. Of course, I think we're thinking that this is Leto. So we're inside an ornithopter cabin, I suppose. Let's see. My handwriting has defeated me. The call light. There we go. That's what that is. The call light began flashing in front of Alia, their escort captain wanting to know why they returned to the desert. She took the microphone, explained that they'd paid a brief homage to her father's tomb. The captain reminded her that it was late. We will go to Arakeen now, she said, replacing the microphone. Hayt took a deep breath, banked their thopter around to the north. It was my father's arm you felt, wasn't it? Perhaps, says Hayt. Pardon me, his voice was that of a His voice was that of a mentat computing probabilities, and she saw he had regained his composure. And here we go. This is the little bit here. Are you aware of how I know my father? Hayt says, I have some idea. And then Alia says, well, let me make it clear, she said. Briefly, she explained how she'd awakened to Reverend Mother awareness before birth, a terrified fetus with the knowledge of countless lives embedded in her nerve cells. And all this after the death of her father. I know my father as my mother knew him, she says, in every last detail of experience she shared with him. In a way, I am my mother. I have all her memories up to the moment when she drank the water of life and entered the trance of transmigration. Hayt says, your brother explains something of this. Alia says, he did? Why? Hayt says, I asked. Why? A mentat requires data. Oh. And I think that's kind of a almost meant to be, is it because you're interested in me? This kind of thing. And he goes, no, it's data. But maybe that's why he wants the data. If you see what I mean. Now, let's have a wee chat about this, folks. Let me just see if you've got any wee comments before we do so. Yeah. Carl says she seems aggressively headstrong and impulsive. Yeah. Perhaps an act of defiance against the voices of other memory. Yeah, anger's a thing. Anger's a thing with her here. But her sense of, I don't know, there's a number of aspects to her character that I think are quite cheeky. Where did we get the, let's just, if we can run back to it here. Hang on a second, I need two hands to do this. I think we're back in another chapter. Yeah, she's a few, contradictions in terms, I suppose. Goodness. Right, bear with me a wee second. I really must get some sort of wee tab markers in this book for just to indicate where chapters are. Make things easier to find. Seeing that, they all begin at number 1. Not that one. There we go. Earth. She's an earth figure, a demi-goddess whose special charge is to protect the tribes through her powers of violence. She's Reverend Mother to their Reverend Mothers, to pilgrims who seek her out with demands that she restore virility or make the barren fruitful. She is often a form of anti-mentat, which we'd have to assume is going against the analytical and the logical. She feeds on the strong human desire for the mysterious. Living proof that the analytic has limits. She represents ultimate tension. She is the virgin harlot. She's witty, vulgar, and cruel, and destructive in her whims as a Coriolis storm. Yeah, she's. But I often got that there's a fair amount of aggression and anger with Paul as well. But I think this is part of the. I don't know, the way it's kind of presented us to is that Ali is becoming a woman, that as much as she has all this knowledge and experience, this kind of thing. She's going through a transition change into womanhood, really, and as the way Frank puts it. So this little, I know my father as my mother knew him. In other words, I've had sex with my father. If you see what I mean, is pretty much she has those memories, and this is the strong Oedipal thing here. And I've made a wee note here. Both Alia and Jessica can be seen as Yocasta, who's the wife of Oedipus and Laius. So, in terms of the whole father-mother thing, the vision thing, which I quite like saying because the vision thing's a Sisters of Mercy album that's rather good. We're gonna go to the obvious place when Paul, with his eyes later on, with Oedipus. But it really did occur to me that in this chapter, she's killed her grandfather, by the way. Now, her grandfather is the Baron Harkonnen, the main character that the Baron is based on, as far as I can see. And some only in name. Well, there's things like Stalin and stuff like that. But is Laius the father of Oedipus? She killed him. And there's another thing in this chapter, I suppose, where it's and we'll get to it. There's more Oedipal stuff in this, really, and there's stuff to do with the Oracle at Delphi, etc. as well. Is that we could look at Duncan in a funny way as being the Sphinx And she'll say later on in this chapter, "You speak in riddles." And of course, if we know the riddle of the Sphinx, that whole story. For anybody who doesn't know it, by the way, I suppose there's no. I'm going to keep the Lord Raglan bit for a little bit because there's a little bit here where Hayt kind of sort of indicates how Paul jumps into Lord Raglan's little list. But I'll just read you this little bit here. This is from. So we were saying kind of very soon that we kind of wanted to do this. So I've got about a couple of pages here from Apollodorus's library. And this is to do with Laius and Oedipus, and this leads into a whole, this is the core of Theban mythology, I suppose, going back to, would it be Deucalion? Who do we go to? The abduction of Europa to Crete and the dispersal of the sons of Agenor. You can tell where Tolkien gets a lot of his stuff from this as well, can't you? Right, so Theban mythology. And it links into Cretan mythology and it links into, oh goodness. So here we go. This is after the death of, this is the Oedipus myth, I suppose, from Apollodorus. After the death of Amphion, Laius took over the kingdom. He married a daughter of Menoikeus, whose son called Jocasta, others called Epicasta. An oracle from the gods had warned him not to have a child, for if he did, the son who would be born to him would become his father's murderer. But while he was drunk with wine, he had intercourse with his wife. When the child was born, he pierced its ankles with buckle pins and passed it to a herdsman for exposure. But when he exposed it on Mount Kithaeron, the herdsman of Polybus, king of Corinth, discovered the baby and brought it to the king's wife, Periboea. She took him and passed him off as her own son, and after she healed his ankles, she called him Oedipus, giving him that name because of his swollen feet. There you go, Oedipus means swollen feet. When the boy grew up and surpassed the others of his age and strength, they grew jealous and poured scorn on him for being a superstitious child. He questions Periboea, but could learn nothing from her, so he went to Delphi and asked who his true parents were. The god told him not to return to his native land, for if he did, he would murder his father and sleep with his mother. Hearing this, and believing that he really was born from those who were said to be his parents, he kept away from Corinth. That's where all of your Freudian stuff falls down right there, I think. But as he was traveling through Phocis in his chariot, he came across Laius, also driving in a chariot on a certain narrow track. And when Polyphontes, the herald of Laius, told him to make way and killed one of his horses because he refused to obey or was slow to do so, Oedipus was enraged and killed both Polyphontes and Laius, and he drove on to Thebes. Laius was buried by Damostratus, king of Plataea, and Creon, son of Menoikeus. Succeeded to the throne. During his reign, a disaster of no small proportion struck Thebes, for Hera sent the Sphinx. The mother of the Sphinx was Echidna, and her father Typhon, and she had the face of a woman, the chest, feet, and tail of a lion, and the wings of a bird. She had learned a riddle from the Muses, and seated on Mount Phakion, she posed it to the Thebans. The riddle ran as follows: what is it that has a single voice and has 4 feet, and then 2 feet, and then 3 feet? Now the Thebans possessed an oracle telling them that they would be freed from the Sphinx when they solved her riddle, so they gathered together repeatedly to seek the solution. But when they failed to discover it, the Sphinx would carry one of them off and devour him. When many had died in this way, including ultimately Creon's son Haemon, Creon proclaimed that he would give both the kingdom and the widow of Laius to the man who could solve the riddle. When Oedipus heard of this, he supplied the answer, saying that the riddle of the Sphinx referred to a man, for he is 4-footed as a baby when he crawls on all fours, 2-footed as an adult, and takes on a third limb in old age in the form of a stick. So the Sphinx hurled herself from the Acropolis, and Oedipus took over the kingdom, and also without realizing it, married his mother. He had 2 sons by her, Polynices and Eteocles, and 2 daughters, Ismene and Antigone. There are some who say, however, that these children were born to him by Eurygeneia, daughter of Hyperphas. Excuse me. Afterwards, when what was unknown was revealed, Jocasta hanged herself in a noose, and Oedipus put out his eyes and was driven from Thebes, cursing his sons, who watched him being expelled from the city without coming to his aid. Arriving with Antigone at Colonus in Attica, where the sanctuary of the Eumenides lies, he sat down there as a suppliant and received a friendly reception from Theseus and died not long afterwards. Pardon me. Now, there's a few different things in relation to Oedipus's death, etc. We've got, so that's within just Apollodorus and his library of Greek mythology. Great stuff, I think. And we'll have a wee chat about, whenever we get to it, we'll have a wee chat about Lord Raglan's little list in relation to Oedipus. Because I suppose at the end of Dune, if there are 22 steps for Lord Raglan's ritualistic path that the hero goes through, Dune ends at step 13. Pardon me. And what we get is from steps 14 onwards is kind of Dune Messiah. We'll have a wee chat about it when we get to it, folks. But there you go. It's always a pleasure to read from Apollodorus. I'll sit and read this all day long. This is, arguably, you can tell how battered it is. One of my all-time favorite books. There's a few wee notes actually there at the back, but I should have. Hang on a second, just to quickly have a look. Thebans. Excuse me, 105. Let's have a wee quick nosy just to be thorough. Let's see if there's anything of note. Epicasta when Odysseus. Oh. Others call her Epicasta, as in the Odyssey 11.271, when Odysseus meets her in Hades. But Jocasta is general in later writers. There we go. Now, the proper name for Oedipus is Oedipus, I believe. This is a wee note here. Called me that the name Oedipus is derived from Oedium, to swell, and pus, a foot. This is a valid etymology, but the familiar Latinized form of his name is used in the translation. For further details of all following, see Apollodorus' main source, Sophocles is Oedipus the king, and Oedipus at Colonus. There we go. All right, let me just have a wee quick look here, folks. There's a wee note on the Sphinx here to do with theogony. The Sphinx is the daughter of Orthus and Chimera. In the absence of a settled tradition, different sources pointed to various episodes in Theban history that might have caused the deity to send her. Apollodorus may be referring to the tradition that Hera sent her in anger at Laios' abduction of Chrysippus, which we've talked about in our Pelopids and Dune videos, folks, if anyone wants to check them out. It's also said that Ares sent her, still angry at the murder of his dragon, or Dionysus, angry at his rejection by Pentheus. Excuse me. There's another thing here about Oedipus cursing his sons. And it says it is also said that he cursed them for setting the silver table and golden goblet of Cadmus before him, so reminding him of his birth, and for serving him meat from the haunch, considered a less honourable portion rather than the shoulder. Again, that's from Sophocles. Oedipus at Colonus. Following Sophocles' Oedipus at Colonus, in early sources he continued to rule in Thebes. This is also implied in the traditions from early epic mentioned in the previous two notes. Colonus, which is Sophocles' birthplace, lay a mile north of Athens. Yeah, so we have a whole bunch of stuff in, and it follows on. One of my guitars is called Antigone. Excuse me, folks, that was a fair bit of reading. I'm going to have to take some fluids here. Oh, goodness. But yeah. I think there's an awful lot of the Oedipus myth, and I'm starting to see it as much on Alia as it is on Paul, to be honest with you. So I don't know what you think, folks, but there we go. Just to catch up with your comments before I pile on, Carlos is saying, interesting point. Shouldn't women only have memories up to conception? How then do they have memories of older ancestors? Yeah, there's an awful lot of problems with other memory. To be honest with you, the other question I suppose comes about. Surely that there can't be any. The other thing I thought about, there can't be any women prior to the discovery of this ability of how to get other memory. Would that make sense? I don't know. The whole other memory thing gets really complicated, doesn't it? I think we're going to see how complicated it gets when we move in with when we move to Children of Dune and we get to see Alia and her relationship with the Baron. And I suppose the question is he? Well, it's a question we've had a good old argument discussion. I use argument in the Greek sense. A good discussion about here, more than once, about what's the Baron doing in her other memory and what does that mean. No easy answers with it, I think, Carlos. That's the problem. So there we go. That is just that. Right, I've got to figure out where I was here. Yes, there we go. I think it's quite. I think it's quite obvious. One other thing I wanted to mention, by the way, is before we moved on, this kind of Oedipal thing, is that in relation to how Paul's relationship with Leto the First, his father, is that Leto is an absentee parent, basically. And I just made a wee note that in terms of Alia, how she knows her father, he's absent from her life, obviously, because he's dead, but she has all these details of him. And if Paul can see into the female line, look at his mother's, that's the thing. It gets really confused. Brad Rose, there's Brad. How you doing, Brad? Good. I was thinking about you. Haven't heard from you in a while. How you keeping? I hope you're doing well. Discourse is the word. Very good. Yes. I always though have argument in the Greek sense of the word is what I would as a good old natter, a good chat. But yeah, discourse. Good one. I hope you're keeping well, Brad. How's things out in your part of the world? I was actually thinking, the other day, I haven't heard from Brad in ages, and I know the time difference. And I was actually thinking I must do a late night show or something into the AM here, But thank you very much, and I hope you're keeping well, sir. So yeah, I knew my father's my mother, and he was very Oedipal. Vision, eyes, all of this kind of stuff. And again, that kind of inevitability with Oedipus, I think. I'll see if I can dig out some more stuff on him. But that's just what we read there was quickly from Apollodorus's Library of Greek Mythology. There was another wee thing, by the way. Oh, here, I'll tell you what, I'll bring this up. I bookmarked it. That we were talking about a wee while back. Hang on, let me see. I know I bookmarked it. And it was we were chatting about the God Emperor. There it is. Now, way back, and don't ask me about this because I can't remember, but we were having a chat about worms and cultures that have worms in them, and worms and mythology, etc., etc. We were chatting about the God Emperor. How do we chat about Crom Croc in Ireland, our serpent god, if you like, the great worm, and a few other things. And it was Chaya Rivka had told us a story about, and I've never heard this before, and it was to do with a worm. Shamir, isn't it? Let me see if I can remember this correctly. Hang on. Is it Shamir? It is the worm Shamir. For anybody who's interested in this kind of thing, the link that I've just posted there is from a book called Jewish Fairy Stories by Gerald Friedlander, with illustrations by Beatrice Hirschfeld from 1917. Great stuff. And way back then, whenever we were chatting about this, I think Chaya had said about this story. We were talking. I think it was to do with, and I'm not sure if this is actually the same story, but it's to do with Shamir the worm. I think it's the similar. So it's King Solomon and the worm. Is the first story there from Gutenberg, and it's funny enough. We were just sitting chatting with one of my students the other day, who was studying Shakespeare with, and we had a quick note. I was pointed out Project Gutenberg for some reason or another, and that book was sitting on the front on the front of Gutenberg, and I went, ooh, and I clicked it, and then I went, ooh, King Solomon and the Worm. So I haven't had a chance to read it all yet. I had a wee quick flick through, and went, that's the story that Chaya told us about. So if anybody's curious about reading it, there you go. There's the Jewish fairy stories, free. It's not a massive book. Let's see, that story is only 15 pages long. King Solomon the Worm from the Babylonian Talmud. And there's a bunch of others. There's Falsehood and Wickedness, The Wicked King and His Bride, The Two Jewels, The Beggar at the Wedding, The Clever Wife, The Coins of Elijah, and The Fox and the Raven. So anybody who's into their fairy stories, etc., fairy stories, myths, all great to me. But if anybody wants to check it out, I'll be having a nosy. I actually thought it might even be worth recording, but we'll have to get to the end of it and see. This chapter, Cynthia's saying, this chapter is full of body parts missing, as with the corpse in the desert memorialized, the skull at El Quds, and remembered, the arms around Hayt's Duncan's shoulders, yes, and even the salute with the hand. Perhaps these body parts point to the identity struggles in Alia and Duncan, or perhaps the mystery of the Tleilax shape changers. How to identify friend, foe when the body parts change. It's a really good point. I'd actually made a few wee comments about, just whenever we get to the end, about the Tleilax, and just sort of I was thinking about kind of, I don't know, maybe it's because I was having a wee look at that book on fairy tales, but I was thinking about analogues with face dancers. What are they? Are they some sort of metamorphic transhuman, post-human even? Are they, can they be considered human? But like changelings and doppelgangers, this kind of thing from fairy tales and myth. But that's a very good point, Cynthia. Skulls, and yeah, it's a bit gruesome as well, isn't it? It's a bit, again, not to forget that Hayt is still a sort of a gula, which is a ghoul in a funny way. But yeah, where did we get to? So easy to find actually with the Hayt Duncan thing. So a little bit of brief homage to your father's tomb. The captain reminded her that it was late. So Alia says, "We will go to Araking now," she said, replacing the microphone. I've moved forward a wee bit, haven't I? Yeah, sorry, let me catch up. I'll figure out where. Yes, we were just chatting about the kind of, I know my father, as my mother did. Yeah, your brother explained some of this. He did. Why? I asked. Why? Mentat requires data. Oh, you kind of always think that she wants him to say, "Oh, because I was interested in you," or something like that. Because the "oh" is a bit flat, isn't it? She looked down at the flat expanse of the shield wall, tortured rock, pits, and crevices. He saw the direction of her gaze, said, "A very exposed place that down there, Alia. But an easy place to hide," she said. She looked at him. "It reminds me of a human mind, with all its concealments." "Ah," says Hayt. "Ah? What does that mean?" "Ah." She was suddenly angry with him, and the reason for it escaped her. Again, this anger. And Hayt says, "You'd like to know what my mind conceals." It was a statement, not a question. That's the thing. I write down a lot in this book. She says, "How do you know I haven't exposed you for what you are by my powers of prescience?" she demanded. And I think that's the problem, that all of the And I suppose it's one for us, really, as well, isn't it? It's a problem that have all the conspirators have. I wonder, do they really know what's going on if they're prescient? And it's a good question for us as we go forward. And ultimately, when we get there, I think, well, Paul does at the very least. It depends on what they're thinking about, I suppose. Sorry, folks, blowing smoke into the camera there. It's an interesting comment, though, isn't it? The human mind, with all its concealments, none of us really know what's going on inside another person's head. And I suppose it's a thing that you can't know, isn't it? To be honest with you, isn't it? What is it? I've heard it quoted as being someone like Shine Ayan. I don't know where I heard this, but Shine Ayan is the author of The Water Margin. What was it they say that you could know someone your entire life, have breakfast, lunch, dinner with them every day, share employment, social activities, etc. Be friendly with this person, but you will not know that person at all. I think that whatever the quotation was or something, it was, if you want to know that person, string them up by their feet and stick a knife in their guts. And for 30 seconds, you'll get to meet the real person. Isn't that terrible? I think I wonder where I heard that. It's attributed to Shine Ayan, I think, but I'm not sure if it is him. There are bits in The Water Margin that are a bit a wee bit dodgy, to say the least. Not all of the heroes are that nice, I suppose. There he is, Shine Ayan. I'll get the spelling for you. There you go. If anybody's not read The Water Margin, by the way, it's a great book. All Men Are Brothers, or The Tale of 108 Heroes and One Bad Man. I think that's my preferred title, actually. I like that. But it's a strange thing, isn't it? Yeah, if anyone, if you like a good, I would say The Water Margin, if you like a good sort of heroic fantasy, that kind of thing, it's partly historical. It's a great read. If anybody's into that kind of thing, Amazon's got the Japanese TV series of The Water Margin up there at the minute on Amazon. If anybody wants to watch it, if you've not seen it, it's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Love it. But I was actually watching a bit of it, a few episodes in, and I saw recently the first big battle of The Water Margin against the government forces, and I just really enjoyed it. It was top martial arts sort of TV with really good literature behind it, if you see what I mean. So this whole So, how do you know I haven't exposed you for what you are by my powers of prescience? She demanded. Have you? You seem genuinely curious. No. Sybils have their limits. Sybils have limits. And I suppose it's interesting, if we went back a wee bit to the conversation between Irulan and the Reverend Mother Gaius Helen Mohiam, there's a little bit about Sybils there, isn't it? That I kind of thought that the Sybil in question, pardon me, was the Reverend Mother. Here we go. Bear with me a wee second. Let's see if I can find it. So she's playing. Yeah, there we go. It's not too hard to find things here. Hang on. There we go, Sybils. So let me just quickly check what chapter. Well, this is chapter 7, as I'm calling it. We'll have to watch this. The one that begins with the epigraph, "Truth suffers from too much analysis." Just towards, where are we? Oh, right at the very end of it. So if you went to the page before chapter 8, which is the Fremen see her as the earth figure, immediately the page before that, We have Bohème returning to her tarot cards, laying them out in the Fire Eddy pattern. Immediately she got the Kwisatz Haderach of the major arcana, and the card lay coupled with the Eight of Ships. The Sibyl, hoodwinked and betrayed. And at the time I thought, wonder is that Bohème? And it possibly is, I think. But we have another Sibyl here in the form of Alia. So Sibyl, we've had a wee chat about this. Sibyls are prophetesses or oracles in ancient Greece. It's a great word, I quite like. Sibyl makes you think of Basil Fawlty, doesn't it? Just off Wikipedia. I love stuff like this, by the way. Sibyl at Delphi has been dated to as early as the 11th century BC by Pausanias, when he described local traditions in his writings from the 2nd century AD. At first, there appears to have only been a single Sibyl. By the 4th century BC, there appear to have been at least 3 more: Phrygian, Erythraean, and Hellespontine. By the 1st century BC, there are at least 10 Sibyls located in Greece, Italy, the Levant, and Asia Minor. There you go. The etymology from the Latin Sibylla, from the ancient Greek Sibylla. Name from Aeolic Sibylla, the equivalent of Attic Theobulla, divine counsel. The etymology is not accepted in modern handbooks, which list the origin as unknown. There we go. There have been alternate proposals in 19th century philology suggesting Old Italic or Semitic derivation. First known Greek writer to mention a Sibyl based on the testimony of Plutarch is Heraclitus. There we go. Here's a quote. The Sibyl with frenzied mouth, uttering things not to be laughed at, unadorned and unperfumed, yet reaches to 1,000 years with her voice by aid of the god. So great stuff, this, I think. We're going to get something very interesting from the very, very famous from the Delphic Oracle coming up in a little minute or two. Sibyls have limits. He appeared to be amused, and this reduced Alia's anger. Amused? Have you no respect for my powers? She asked. The question sounded weakly argumentative, even to her own ears. A number of things that she says here will be, that's a good way of putting it, I suppose, weakly argumentative, almost childish, and almost, I don't know, how would you call it? What would you call it? Being a bit, showing sort of airs and graces, this kind of thing. Have you no respect for my powers? Here we go. I respect your omens and portents, perhaps, more than you think. I was in the audience for your morning ritual. And what does that signify, says Alia. It says, you've great ability with symbols, he said, keeping his attention on the thought there's controls. That's a Bene Gesserit thing, I'd say. But as with many witches, you've become careless of your powers. Apologies, folks. She felt a spasm of fear and blared, how dare you? Before we go on, I think symbols, just quickly to mention it, if we go back to Dune, the problems with, how would we put it, the Butlerian Jihad, the Commission of Ecumenical Translators, etc., all the problems of trying to create all these religions. One of the things was, I think, that we talked about, that they forgot about the importance of symbols, how important that they are to people. Great ability with symbols. Interesting. She felt a spasm of fear. How dare you? I dare much more than my makers anticipated, says Hayt. Because of that rare fact, I remain with your brother. And Alia, we're told, studied the steel balls which were his eyes. No human expression there. The stillsuit hood concealed the line of his jaw. His mouth remained firm, though. Great strength in it and determination. His words had created a reassuring intensity. We're really getting kind of, as Alia studies him, I suppose. I quite like studied the steel balls, which were his eyes. she's really, again, it's kind of pointing out his features, isn't it? I suppose the line of the jaw, the mouth remained firm, great strength in it. It's kind of an appraisal of his body, isn't it? Really, possibly his genes. Alia's thoughts here. Dare much more. That was a thing Duncan Idaho might have said. Had the Tleilaxu fashioned their Gola better than they knew, or was this mere sham part of his conditioning? And it's a good point, I suppose. Ultimately, we'll have to consider that the Tleilaxu have created a tool in a similar way to the Bene Gesserit, and how does it get away from them? It's an interesting question that we could ask in light of today's society, as we kind of, I know that the artificial intelligence that we're seeing being very much thrust upon us, I suppose, at the minute. And the idea of losing control of a tool or a machine, etc. It's an old one. Things like this happen. Machines break down, and I suppose the interesting thing at the minute is not that we're at artificial intelligence singularity or anything kind of close to it just yet, but it's almost like diet AI. We get to sample a weak version of it first. Explain yourself, Gola, she commanded. Know thyself. Is that thy commandment? And again, she felt that he was amused. So know thyself is not a commandment. It's written at the oracle at Delphi, and in Greek it's know thyself. If I'm pronouncing that correctly, let's just look it up. Know thyself. Greek aphorism, which means know thyself, know yourself. Oh, for goodness sake, that's appalling, Wikipedia. Hang on. There it is. Now, it's at the oracle at Delphi. So, as a philosophical, know thyself, know thy certain, is a philosophical maxim which is inscribed upon the temple of Apollo in the ancient Greek precinct of Delphi. The best known of the Delphic maxims, it has been quoted and analyzed by numerous authors throughout history and has been given many different applications, although traditionally attributed to the 7 sages of Greece or to the god Apollo himself. The inscription likely had its origin in a popular proverb. So, know thyself, nothing in excess. Sigma, let me see if I can find this now, are things that are marked. Well, I think there's a whole pile of things marked there. Let's see. Delphic maxims, but know thyself, nothing in excess, give a pledge, and a trouble is at hand. And trouble is at hand. Excuse me, were prominently located at the entrance to the temple and were traditionally said to have been authored by the legendary 7 sages of Greece or even by Apollo. Let's see, it says, I know there's a whole bunch of them. I think maybe people started doing a bit of graffiti or something, but a further 147 maxims documented by Stobaeus in the 5th century AD were also located somewhere in the vicinity of the temple. The antiquity and authenticity of these maxims was once in doubt, but recent archaeological discoveries have confirmed that some of the sayings quoted Stobaeus were current as early as the 3rd century BC. There's no citation for that whatsoever, so take that with a pinch of salt. Know thyself. Maiden agon is nothing too much, nothing in excess. And what's the other one? Egua para date is given a pledge and trouble is at hand. I didn't know that one. But the Greek letter sigma, I believe, is also meant to be carved there, which is a bit of a mystery. Yeah, there's the. If anybody's curious, if you want to type in Delphic maxims to Wikipedia, has he got them all? Let me see. Yeah, why not? We've got the 147 maxims of Stobaeus. There's no mention. I don't see any mention of the letter sigma. Oracular statements from the Delphi. Yeah, there's loads of stuff on Wikipedia, etc. For anybody who wants to go have a nosy. How the world used to work, I suppose. I think it's very interesting. Now, so know thyself. Explain yourself. Go up. Know thyself. Is that thy commandment? again associated with oracles, etc. Again, she felt that he was amused. Don't bandy words with me, you thing. I think we're having Soup Potter made a wee comment prior to this. Was it Alia getting annoyed with Stilgar? Was it calling him primitive? And we're just trying to figure out why is she calling him primitive? What's the use of that insult? And we've got something else here. It could be any word. You asshole, you idiot, don't bandy words with me, you thing. Is what an insult. And she put a hand to the crysknife in its throat sheath. Why were you given to my brother? So it's funny. I found that little first bit quite funny, but I guess whenever I first read it, I didn't really kind of get the fact that it's more vicious, isn't it? Don't bandy words with me, you thing. Why were you given to my brother? That okay. But I read it. I thought it was quite funny. Pardon me. So here it says, your brother tells me that you watched the presentation. You've heard me answer that question for him. Answer it again for me. I am intended to destroy him. Is that the Mentat speaking? And here it says, you knew the answer to that without asking, he chided. And you know as well that such a gift wasn't necessary. Your brother already was destroying himself quite adequately. And I've made a wee question here, a wee comment, just that Paul's destroying himself. Is this also true of Alia? That's just my own wee question there. She weighed these words, her hand remaining on the haft of her knife. A tricky answer, but there was sincerity in the voice. Then why such a gift? She probed. It may have amused the Tleilaxu, and it is true that the guild asked for me as a gift. Why? Same answer. How am I careless of my powers? This statement here is very good. How are you employing them? He countered. Now, why such a gift? It may have amused the Tleilaxu. Why? Same answer. Why did the guild ask for me as a gift? Same answer. How am I, because they're amused them, possibly, is what he's suggesting here. But how am I careless of my powers? How are you employing them? He countered. And it's a very good question. What do Paul and Alia do with their amazing, amazing powers? Do they make life better for everybody? And the answer is no, they don't. And it's a good wee point to make. I'll just take a wee quick pause here, folks. I'm just going to need to run to the loo quite quickly, and I'll be right back. Excuse me a wee moment. There we go. Sorry about that, folks. Pardon me. Oh, so it is a good question to think about. What do Paul and Alia do with their powers? Um, and I suppose Paul looking for the book. Well, we're going to see a bit more of it, I suppose, and it doesn't seem to be very helpful or useful to society, does it? Hmm. And if it was the case, I suppose, of the Bene Gesserit breeding for a Kwisatz Haderach, and we talked about when we were doing the Dune Book Club that what is a Kwisatz Haderach apart from really a weapon that they could wield, but you kind of got the sense that it would open up the idea of the Kwisatz Haderach that would open up knowledge, and it's a bit the previous epilogue from the previous chapter with the orgy is as tool of statecraft. Just to comment on it, for our purposes as the guild talking here, we borrow a definition from the Bene Gesserit and we consider the various worlds as gene pools, sources of teachings and teachers, sources of the possible. That's essentially what other memory would offer up, I think, that it provides a vast range of life experience. Teachings, things that you can learn from, and if you have the memories of these people, then effectively they are teachers, I suppose, aren't they? That their life experience would be passed on to you, so that you could benefit in some way from it. Because you could look at it, the kind of other memory might be just full of people who've all died. It is very problematic. So, this question, his question slashed through to her own misgivings, her own self-doubts. She took her hand away from the knife and asked, "Why do you say my brother was destroying himself?" And Hayt says, here we go, "Oh, come now, child. What are these vaunted powers? Sorry, where are these vaunted powers? Have you no ability to reason?" And controlling her anger, she said, "Reason for me, Mentat." Very well. He calls her child there. Again, her anger is increasing. She's controlling it, but that's he's being condescending to her a bit, and I think he's being deliberately provocative. I'm not too sure. He glanced around at their escort and returned his attention to their course. The plain of Arrakeen was beginning to show beyond the northern rim of the shield wall. The pattern of the Pan and Graben villages remained indistinct beneath a dust pall, but the distant gleam of Arrakeen could be discerned. And Hayt says, symptoms. Your brother keeps an official panegyrist who, and Alia interrupts him here, who was a gift of the Fremen Naibs. Now, this is Korba we're talking about. And Hayt says this, an odd gift from friends. Why would they surround him with flattery and servility? Have you really listened to this panegyrist? And he quotes him here. The people are illuminated by Muad'Dib. The Umma regent, our emperor, came out of darkness to shine resplendently upon all men. He is our sire. He is precious water from an endless fountain. He spills joy for all the universe to drink. Pah! What a load of hooey. The water metaphors are there, of course. He is precious water from an endless fountain, spills joy for all the universe to drink. It doesn't sound like the case, does it? But it's a very good question. Why would the Fremen Naibs give him Korba as a gift, if you like? It's kind of strange. Is it more a question like, do we want rid of Korba? Let's give him to the Emperor. I don't know, but yes, a sycophant basically. It's flattery and servility. No, if I had someone around me like that, it would do my head in. It really would. I'm a person that doesn't take praise particularly well. I don't like it. It makes me feel uncomfortable. if you see what I mean, to have this level of kind of sycophantic toadyism, if you want, and the fact that such a position, exists. But it's a very good question. Why would an odd gift from friends? Hmm. And of course, we do know that the Fremen are involved in the conspiracy, don't we? Speaking softly, Alia said, "If I but repeated your words for our Fremen escort, they'd hack you into bird feet." And I've just written, is that another symptom? Such as those that Hayt was talking about, if you like. I was just looking for that wee bit. Symptom. Something which shows sickness, if you like. But yet she's very threatening, isn't she? They've popped out to go check out a body, fly there and fly back. How many times has she threatened him? Well, it's going to go. I suppose maybe it's going to go up a bit. But but if I but repeated your words for our Fremen escort, they'd hack you into bird feet. There's something of the symptom of it, if you like. Symptoms. Your brother keeps an official panegyrist. That was the bit. Someone to toady to and say how amazing you are. Is this another symptom of what Alia says here? If I but repeated your words for our Fremen escort, they'd hack you into bird feet. A symptom, that you can have people killed for saying stuff that you don't like or that makes you angry. And Hayt's response, and it's kind of a childish thing to say, isn't it? Then tell them. And he says, "My brother rules by the natural law of heaven." And that's Atreides propaganda. And Hayt says, "You don't believe that, so why say it?" And she says, "Oh, how do you know what I believe?" And she experienced trembling, there we go, that no Bene Gesserit powers could control. The Ghola was having an effect she hadn't anticipated. So they've both had trembles within this chapter, I suppose. "You commanded me to reason as a mentat," he reminded her. "No mentat knows what I believe." Lots of exclamation marks in this chapter. Were full-on Bangaria from Frank. She took 2 deep, shuddering breaths. "How dare you judge us?" It's just very quickly. It's another one of those things that we consistently have had all of these abilities built up. I think throughout Dune, and I think consistently we do see flaws in them. But if you're the level of Bene Gesserit control, we've seen almost all the female characters who are associated with the Bene Gesserit have the inability to cover their physicality, if you like, their expressions, the trembling, and no Bene Gesserit powers could control. It's kind of, what was the point of them? I thought this was the point of being able to have that level of mastery over your body, And of course, the effect that she hadn't anticipated, I think, is love. She's falling in love with him. "No mentat knows what I believe. How dare you judge us?" "Judge you? I don't judge. You have no idea how we were taught." And here we go. "Both of you were taught to govern," says here. "You were conditioned to an overweening thirst for power." And I think that's a very good use of a word there, overweening, as opposed to overwhelming, if you like. Overweening thirst for power. The parents are at fault there in a way. "You were imbued with a shrewd grasp of politics and a deep understanding for the uses of war and ritual." Natural law? What natural law? I think I think I have a quote somewhere from Frank talking about natural law, when he's chatting about ethics and morality, and I think it's one that we discussed, that ethics and morality are pretty much the same thing. I think Frank it's a quote that's in the PhD videos, folks. If you want to check it out. It's the one where he says that that there's a natural law and we need a response, a higher ethical law, this kind of thing. And it was quite a confusing little quote, but that's that. Natural law, I don't know if anybody believes in it or not. Natural law, one thing, I suppose we would call it natural justice, but there is a difference between law and justice, and we're going to have a wee natter about that in a bit as well. Natural law, what natural law? Sorry, that myth haunts human history. Haunts. It's a ghost. It's insubstantial, unreal. Is your jihad a natural law? And again, I suppose what the Atreides are doing, if I was doing that, what they're up to, I would have severe problems sleeping. With the body count, etc. Even though it's all at a distance, it's all just statistics. I think it would bother me. I think it should bother any normal human being. Alia, just is your jihad a natural law? And remember, the jihad is still going on, and that as much as it's war in this book, essentially it's war for, as in the jihad in this book, I would say is the extension is a war in the sense of it being an extension of politics by any or all means. There's negotiations and political settlements going on around the jihad that we figured out previously there. Stilgar's talking about the Zebulon computations, and we have another planet that's kind of, bartering over surrender, this kind of thing. So very much the jihad is still going on. Mental jabber, she sneered. Is it though? That's the question. I'm a servant of the Atreides, and I speak with candor. And what Alia says here is quite revealing, I think. Servants. We've no servants, only disciples. And I think that's her buying into her own nonsense, I think. It says, and I am a disciple of awareness. Understand that, child. And you, don't call me child, she snapped. And she slipped her crysknife half out of its sheath. I stand corrected. That disciple of awareness is kind of important, and we're going to hit it in a little bit at the end of the chapter. But it is what he is. It's he's being truthful here. Hayt is a disciple of awareness. Understand that, child, and you. We don't get to find out what he was going to say. Don't call me child, she snapped. I stand corrected. He glanced at her, smiled, returned his attention to piloting the thopter. The cliff-sided structure of the Atreides keep could be made out now. Dominating, there you go, my handwriting, the northern suburbs of Arrakeen. This is Hayt again. You're something ancient in flesh that is little more than a child, and the flesh is disturbed by its new womanhood. And he says, I don't know why I listen to you, she growled, but she let the crysknife fall back into its sheath, wiped her palm on her robe. Sweaty. This is one of these ones where I wrote a comment just immediately before the comment is made for me, I suppose. But I just wrote sweaty, and then it goes on and says the palm, wet with perspiration, disturbed her sense of Fremen frugality. Such a waste of the body's moisture. That's exactly where I was going with it. This is the little bit I've scribbled up some more. Leto, Alia is Oedipus, Leto is Laius, Jessica is Yocasta, Duncan is the Sphinx. There's a little bit more of that coming up here, but here it says, you listen because you know I'm devoted to your brother. My actions are clear and easily understood. And I've written next to that, that's nonsense. And why doesn't he know it's nonsense? Or maybe his actions are clear and easily understood to him, but they're not really to us, and they're not clear in this book at all. And I think Alia's response is the correct one. It's what we should be thinking. Really? Nothing about you is clear and easily understood. You're the most complex creature I've ever seen. How do I know what the Tleilax you built into you? Hayt says, by mistake or intent, they gave me freedom to mold myself. Pardon me. So Alia, again, By mistake or intent, either they did it deliberately, or they didn't. I've got freedom to mold myself. I can become who I wish to be. Alia says, you retreat into Zensunni parables, she accused. The wise man molds himself, the fool lives only to die. Her voice was heavy with mimicry. Disciple of awareness. So she's throwing that back in his face here, which I think is quite funny. We'll be able to throw it back in her face in a wee bit. Excuse me. You retreat into Zensunni parables. The wise man molds himself. The fool lives only to die. There's something paradoxical, I suppose, about that that I wouldn't agree with. But if you run with the kind of the archetypal ideas, to be wise, you have to be a fool first. You cannot become wise without doing foolish things, and it is a truth, believe it or not. Wisdom's a good thing to seek. I think a lot of people tend to focus on intelligence or IQs or education, all these things, but the best use of all of those things, all those tools, if you like, is to attain wisdom. And it's a tricky thing, and it takes time, doesn't it? There are no wise children, really, as much as Hollywood would like us to think so. Saying that, some kids can speak very well, innocently, I suppose, with the truth, is where you get kind of wisdom in children, isn't it? Men cannot separate means and enlightenment, which is a reference to that, says here. So the wise man molds himself. The fool lives only to die. Men cannot separate means and enlightenment. In other words, as far as I can tell, and I don't know if you agree with me on this, the wise man molds himself. Fair enough. The fool lives only to die. There's a comment by, let me see if I can find it for you. Socrates. Excuse me. Oh, goodness, now this might be an old brain problem for me. Bear with me and I'll see if I can find it. It's to do with his death, really, isn't it? Well, the first bit of Socrates that I ever learned, by the way, folks, while I'm having a look for this. Oh, I'll tell you what, do you know something? There'd be a quicker way of doing this. I've got a book of quotations. Hang on. Where are you? Fished you out the other day. Where would you be? That might not be a good idea at all. Let me see if I can see it here. There it is. Right. Hang on. We might get there quicker. So, or Socrates, as Bill and Ted like to call him. Where was I going with this? Basically, the wise man molds himself, the fool lives only to die. Men cannot separate means and enlightenment. And in that case, the wise man who molds himself is the enlightenment. But the means to become a wise man is to be a fool who lives only to die. If you get my sense. That's how I read that. Let me just see if I can, because it's a particular quotation I'm thinking of. Where are we? Socrates. Socrates. Well, yeah, the first bit of Socrates I ever learned was matchbook wisdom. It was literally on a matchbox, and it was the unexamined life is not worth living. Yeah, I like Socrates. The quotation I'm looking for is not there. Let me see. If I can find it. To fear death is not. Is that the one I'm thinking? Let me see. Hang on. It was the purpose of philosophy. which was to. I'm not finding it. Let's just see. To fear death is nothing other than to think oneself wise when one is not. For it is to think one knows what one does not know. No man knows whether death may not turn out to be the greatest blessing for a human being, and yet people fear it as they knew for certain that it is the greatest of evil. It's something about the whole purpose of philosophy. Let's see. It was kind of like the ultimate, if you see what I mean, the ultimate goal. Philosophy on death. There we go. Is that what I'm looking for? Socrates replied, it's because of the immortality of the soul that death was no evil. The purpose of philosophy was to free the soul by guiding it to the eternal truths, and so when death came, it was a liberation. The body, he asserted, was a messy pit of passions and rude cravings. It was something to do like that. But I don't have the exact quotation, I'm afraid. Sorry about that, folks, but it's a good point, I think. Let's see. Yeah, it's a nice little bit of writing, I think. And by mistake or intent, they gave me freedom to mold myself. Retreating into Zensunni parables, the wise man molds himself, the fool lives only to die. Men cannot separate means and enlightenment. And I think that's a jibe back at her. She says you speak in riddles. I didn't find it too hard to figure out. Hayt says I speak to the opening mind. Alia says I'm going to repeat all this to Paul. Again, that kind of childish. I'm going to tell on you. And Hayt's nonchalant about it. He's heard most of it already, he says. So again, you speak in riddles, and just the whole Oedipus association, riddles, and I know it's not too obvious, but there's lots of it in this book. And I just thought for a minute, I wrote down here, you speak in riddles, and as I was going with the idea of Alia being a kind of female aspect of Oedipus, in the same way that Paul's the male aspect, if you like, of the same character. I was just asking a question: is Duncan the Sphinx here, in that sense? Thing. She found herself overwhelmed by curiosity. How is it you're still alive and free? What did he say? And it says he laughed and he said, people don't want a bookkeeper for an emperor. They want a master, someone who'll protect them from change. But he agreed that destruction of his empire arises from himself. Why would he say such things? Because I convinced him. Because I convinced him I understand his problem and will help him. What could you possibly have said to do that? Asks Alia. And we're told he remained silent, banking the thopter into the downwind leg for a landing at the guard complex on the roof of the keep. I demand you tell me what you said. I'm not sure you could take it. That's quite a cheeky thing. I'll be the judge of that. I command you to speak at once. And Hayt says, permit me to land us first, he said. And not waiting for her permission, he turned onto the base leg, brought the wings into optimum lift, and settled gently onto the bright orange pad atop the roof. It's kind of a funny little exchange between them, isn't it? I think. It's kind of this. I demand you tell me what you said. I command you to speak at once. It really is. Goodness, wouldn't it be nice to just say no? You shouldn't make demands of people. You don't command people. But these characters do. Now, she said, speak. Hayt says, I told him that to endure oneself may be the hardest task in the universe. She shook her head. That's a bitter pill, he said, watching the guards run toward them across the roof, taking up their escort positions. Bitter nonsense, she said. Now, the endurance of the self, if you like. I think this is kind of interesting. The greatest Palatinate Earl and the lowliest stipendiary serf share the same problem. You cannot hire a mentat or any other intellect to solve it for you. There is no writ or inquest or calling of witnesses to provide answers. No servant or disciple can can dress the wound. You dress it yourself or continue bleeding for all to see. And she whirled away from him, realizing in the instant of action realizing in the instant of action what this betrayed about her own feelings. And this is a very nice little bit of writing, I thought, here. Without wile of voice or witch wrought trickery, he had reached into her psyche once more. How did he do this? What have you told him to do? She whispered. Now, he's basically saying the hardest thing to do for anybody is to put up with being you, if you how well do you get on with yourself? What can you, this kind of thing. And it's a question for all of us, it's pretty hard being you, I'm sure. It's pretty hard being me. It's pretty hard being a human being. It's pretty hard being alive. But when it comes to it, I suppose it's, can you live with yourself? Can you endure oneself? How happy are you in your own skin? This kind of thing. And that's a kind of bitter pill, bitter nonsense. It's there's a truth to it, isn't there? That from the greatest Palatinate Earl, the lowliest stipendiary serf. So we're going from royalty to slaves, pretty much. Palatinate. The Rhenish Palatinate is a historical region of Germany prior to World War II. It was also referred to as Rhenish Bavaria as a state of the Holy Roman Empire. It was known as the Lower Palatinate, which designated only the western part of the electorate of the Palatinate as opposed to the Upper Palatinate. There we go. That's quite interesting. They're formerly a Celtic region. The area was conquered by the Roman Empire under Emperor Augustus in about 12 BCE. Thereafter, it was a province of Germania Superior. During the decline of the empire, Almanic tribes settled there. Their territory was conquered by Francia under King Clovis I about 496. And from 511 onwards, the area belonged to the eastern part of Frankish Austrasia, which as Rhenish Franconia became part of East Francia, according to the 843 Treaty of Verdun. No references. And then into the Holy Roman Empire and so on. So another little cultural reference there. Oh, but a stipendiary serf is an interesting one, isn't it? So serf is, according to the dictionary, is just to give an agricultural labourer bound by the feudal system who's tied to working on their lord's estate. But assuming if they're stipendiary means they're getting paid. Assuming they're working for payment rather than vol. Yeah. So from the greatest earl nobility to the lowest stipendiary serf, that's kind of almost a contradiction in terms, isn't it? There we go. Oh no, I suppose it's not. So I'm thinking of something else, but so Ali, we're told, yeah, that's a nice little bit of writing, isn't it? Without wile of voice or witch wrought trickery, he'd reached into your psyche once more. But how did he do this? What have you told him to do? I told him to judge, to impose order. And Alia stared out at the guard, marking how patiently they waited, how orderly. To dispense justice, she murmured. Not that. Until he snapped. Not that. I suggested that he judge no more, guided by one principle, perhaps, and that, to keep his friends and destroy his enemies. And Ali says, well, to judge unjustly then. Hayt says, well, what is justice? Two forces collide, each may have the right in his own sphere. And here's where an emperor commands orderly solutions. Those collisions he cannot prevent, he solves. How? In the simplest way, he decides. keeping his friends and destroying his enemies. Isn't that stability, says Hayt. People want order, this kind or some other. They sit in the prison of their hungers and see that war has become the sport of the rich. That's a dangerous form of sophistication. It's disorderly. Now, let's have a wee look. I told the judge to impose order. That was the little bit that just very quickly had me thinking about Lord Raglan and his ritualistic list that the hero goes through. That's a great wee book, by the way. I'm just reading the last paragraph before the lesson, going, "That's interesting, isn't it?" It just talks about wearing an imitation sword. May be just as significant as wearing a real one, and as with the uniform of the heroes, not with their outfitters, that I'm at present concerned. The pattern then is as follows. I'll give you the pattern quickly if you like. So it's in our chapter on the hero. So 22 steps. I'll just pile through them, folks. The hero's mother is a royal virgin. His father is a king, and often a near relative of his mother, but the circumstances of his conception are unusual, and he is also reputed to be the son of a god. At birth, an attempt is made, usually by his father or his maternal grandfather, to kill him, but he is spirited away and reared by foster parents in a far country. We are told nothing of his childhood, but on reaching manhood, he returns or goes to his future kingdom. After a victory over the king and or giant stroke dragon or wild beast, he marries a princess, often the daughter of his predecessor, and becomes king. Becomes king is step 13 on Raglan's list, although he doesn't marry Irulan there. He does, doesn't he? Well, I suppose we could put that into Dune. So from this point on, in Dune Messiah, this is why I just wanted, based on Hayt's advice to him here are the final steps of the ritual. So step 14 would be, for a time he reigns uneventfully and prescribes laws. And that's the bit where I think we're kind of at here. Later, he loses favor with the gods and or his subjects, and is driven from the throne and city, after which he meets with a mysterious death, often at the top of a hill. His children, if any, do not succeed him. His body is not buried, but nevertheless, he is one or more holy sepulchres. Now, Paul Atreides doesn't hit all 22 of these. He scores 19 on Lord Raglan's list. So there's only two characters from mythology who score higher, and they are Oedipus and Theseus, as far as I can tell. Perseus gets 18 points. So Oedipus, it just says, let us now apply this pattern to our heroes, and we will start with Oedipus. So I just said I would read this out just because we are kind of trying to hammer home the Oedipus myth on top of the Atreides here. So matching the same steps here, Oedipus does all 22. So here we go. His mother Jocasta is a princess, and his father is King Laius, who, like her, is of the line of Cadmus. He was sworn to have no connection with her, but does so when drunk, probably, in the character of Dionysus. Laius tries to kill Oedipus at birth, but he is spirited away and reared by the king of Corinth. We hear nothing of his childhood, but on reaching manhood, he returns to Thebes. After gaining victories over his father and the Sphinx, he marries Jocasta and becomes king. For some years, he reigns uneventfully, but later comes to be regarded as the cause of a plague, and is disposed and driven into exile. He meets with a mysterious death at a place near Athens called the Steep Pavement. He is succeeded by Creon, through whom he was deposed, and though the place of his burial is uncertain, he has several holy sepulchres. It says here, just to continue on with this little note here from Raglan, it says he does not seem to have been regarded as a legislator. Apart from that, we may award him full marks. Fascinating little thing to run through. One of our favorite books, I suppose, and it's not a book that should be read lightly, but we talk about it has flaws, but it's an absolutely brilliant book. I love it. And we've got, tell you what, we've got shape-shifting here. I might have to have a wee nosy at this. I tend to focus on shape-shifting and talking animals. Must have a wee nosy at that. Because this is a book that seriously influenced and In fact, Herbert used it. Brian Herbert comments on it in his biography. Howdy Doc, says Rolando Sada. How you doing, Rolando? Thanks very much for joining us. Good to have you here. Thank you. Carlos is saying introspection is probably endemic to Angola. I would agree. Yeah. who the hell am I? What's going on? I'm a fully grown man, and I can't. I'm supposed to be somebody. Yeah. Very much so. So there you go. Sorry about the wee quick interruption there, folks. I know we've done a couple of things today. One was to run through just the basic Oedipus story from Apollodorus, and then it's just at this point telling him to judge, impose order, etc. These are the kind of parts of the king. Kind of he's ruled uneventfully for 12 years, if you like. These are the aspects of Lord Raglan's rituals. I'll have to read this book again. I don't know when I got this book when I was quite young. And it's a great wee read. If anyone, and I'm sure it's probably not too. I love this little edition. Oh, it's gorgeous. I love books like this. The Hero by Lord Raglan. There's a little cluster of books on mythography, etc. from way back while, but and he splits the book into three aspects: tradition, myth, and drama. Which is quite interesting. I suppose we don't talk about it too much, but in terms of mythology and mythography, particularly Greek and Roman drama is a big part of that. And fortunately for us, the Athenians, for example, had competitions all the time. They loved competing, and we know an awful lot. As much as an awful lot of stuff doesn't survive, we know an awful lot about stuff that did exist, and how stories are carried through from places, from people like Homer and Hesiod way back in the 8th century BC, all the way down that they're still writing about this stuff, and the 300, 400, 500s AD, and the Greeks are we've got a lot of these great Greek plays. I suppose the main stuff that we know about Oedipus towards the end of his life is from Sophocles' Theban trilogy, which is Oedipus, Tyrannus, Antigone, and Oedipus at Colonus are the three plays there. If anybody's into Seamus Heaney, not that I get as much as I work as a tutor, I don't, and I try to bring the classical world into everything I do, much to people's annoyance. There's not many classical studies. That kind of thing is not taught in schools here. There is a kind of classical civilization, I think GCSE or A level or something like that. But the only time you'll get to teach anything remotely related to the classics, I suppose, is basic rhetoric for English lit and English language. Excuse me, but they do the Burial at Thebes, which is Seamus Heaney's translation of Antigone, which is one of those three plays. I said I've got my main bat for being on stage is my big cutaway full-size classical over here, and its name is Antigone because of its filial devotion. But I've always admired Antigone, and I suppose that's why I named the guitar after her. All of my guitars are named after women from Greek mythology or monsters from Greek mythology who are also women. There you go. It's good to give things names, I think. But my guitar's names are to do with their character, if you like, in some way. Now, to keep his friends and destroy his enemies is kind of, oh, sorry, we moved forward a wee bit. The other wee thing, just to comment here, isn't that stupid? People want order. This kind or some other. They sit in the prison of their hungers and see that war has become the sport of the rich. You could say that in some ways. That's a dangerous form of sophistication. It's disorderly. It's arguably something that could be certainly said to be true in historical times in the past. The rich sending everyone else to die. World War I and for example, the United Kingdom, but particularly in Northern Ireland, and every town in Northern Ireland has a cenotaph to the dead in World War I. this idea of going off to fight for king and country just leaves an awful lot of people dead and no harm to the kings at the end of it, I suppose. Though you can't really say that for the Romanovs. But yeah, it's funny, even if you look at something like Hitler, Stalin, the level of death and destruction, and we were talking about this in the previous chapter, weren't we? The level of death and destruction that one person can bring to an entire world, an entire population, because other people do what they're told, is quite appalling. But certainly, I think the more power you have, the more separated you are from the people in the dirt, if you like. Was it the old quote, we're all in the dirt, but some of us are looking up at the stars? But it's a dangerous form of sophistication. War becoming the sport of the rich, thinking things like Canley and stuff. And Canley's supposed to stop the little guys, the ordinary folk like us, from getting slaughtered, but it doesn't seem to be particularly effective in any sense or form whatsoever. War, the sport of the rich, all the rich people, all the Landsraad families, the great houses and lesser houses, if you like, have nuclear weapons at their disposal. To the fact that they keep them, the family atomics is a very weird. It's like, can you imagine me saying, I've got a couple of nukes here in the household? That's the Sloan atomic bombs. That's our family atomics. It's quite bonkers, isn't it? But yeah, and again, war, the sport of the rich, the purview of the stupid, I think, as well. War is an ugly, stupid, evil business, I think. As I always like to point out, I consider the Dune series, and I consider Dune an anti-war book. I don't consider it Star Wars. So again, this kind of another threat from Alia, if you like. I will suggest to my brother that you are much too dangerous and must be destroyed, she said, turning to face him, looking at him. And he's a foil to her, almost to everything she says here. And as his mentat analytic, if you like, to her anti-mentat sense of mystery, he says, a solution I've already suggested, and that's why you're dangerous, she said, measuring out her words. You've mastered your passions. That is not why I'm dangerous. So she still hasn't got it. And in terms of mastering his passions, I think this is a nice moment in the book here. That is not why I'm dangerous. And before she could move, he leaned across, gripped her chin in one hand, planted his lips on hers. There we go. And I've just called this bit the kiss. There we go. Over here somewhere. There you go. It was a gentle kiss, brief. He pulled away, and she stared at him with a shock leavened by glimpses of spasmodic grins on the faces of her guardsmen, still standing at orderly attention outside. They've got witnesses. Alia put a finger to her lips. There'd been such a sense of familiarity about that kiss. His lips had been flesh of a future she'd seen in some prescient byway. That's the wee point, I think, was it yourself making earlier, Carlos, that, in terms of her prescience. Oh, it was way back, wasn't it? Pardon me. Herbert never really made clear what degree of prescience Sally had, but we do know that she had it. Yeah, this is a good example of that. She's definitely seen. It's not that she saw this kiss, I think, but his lips had been flesh of a future she'd seen in some prescient byway. His lips, either that or she, maybe she cut them off and wore them around her neck. I don't think so. In fact, we know so. But I just thought that was just a nice bit of whimsy there. Breast heaving. She said, I should have you flayed because I'm dangerous, because you presume too much. I presume nothing. I take nothing which is not offered to me. Be glad I did not take all that was offered. So the implication is that sex. Though I don't think Would you be wanting to have sex in an ornithopter with a whole bunch of guards surrounding her? Again, the aristocrats, isn't that where we go to that? I shall have you flayed because I'm dangerous, because you presume too much. I presume nothing. I take nothing which is not first offered to me. Be glad I do not take all that was offered. He opened his door and slid out. Come along. We've dallied too long on a fool's errand. And he strode towards the entrance stone beyond the pad. Yeah. I'll tell him everything you've said and everything you did. So I think I've written too many everythings there. Let me just check my notes. Glyptic. I'm still bugged by that word glyptic. Of course, I thought it was gryptic. But let me see. 63. I'll tell him everything you've said and everything you did. Yeah. I put it in too many. That's too many and everything's there. Hayt says, good. Again, just deflects what she says. And he held the door for her. This might be triggering to some people in this day and age, wouldn't it? He takes an unexpected kiss and now he's holding the door for her. Good God. Oh dear. Good. And he held the door for her. The response, he will order you executed, she said, and slipping into the dome. Why, says he, because I took the kiss I wanted. He followed her, his movement forcing her back. The door slid closed behind him. Forcing her back, and the door slid closed behind him. The kiss you wanted. Outrage. So she's gone from anger to outrage. Outrage filled her. All right, Alia, the kiss you wanted then. And it's a nice play on the words and a nice bit of banter, I think. He started to move around her towards the drop field. And Alia says, as though his movement had propelled her into heightened awareness, she realized his candor, the utter truthfulness of him. The kiss I wanted, she told herself. True. And this kind of, I think this might be the spur for Alia here. Your truthfulness, she says, that's what's dangerous. Sorry, I'll read that again. Your truthfulness, that's what's dangerous, she said, following him. So truthfulness is honesty. And Hayt finally says, well, I shouldn't have said finally there. Hayt says, you return to the ways of wisdom. So finally we're getting there, if you like. He said, not breaking his stride. Amentat could not have stated the matter more directly. Now, what is it you saw in the desert? So he tells the truth. That's what makes him dangerous. Honesty is dangerous. And it's something I would absolutely agree with. In that sense, we tend to think about truth a lot in this house. Something I always tell my son, I used to tell my son is that in terms of just getting on in life, truth is your weapon, your armor, and your shield. That's kind of RB thing we say here. There's the old Sloan ones, the ones that have a coat of arms. Their family motto is Viat Veritate, which means by force and by truth. So yeah, there's been a realization. She's admitted to herself that she wants, that this kiss is what she wanted, and you kind of get the sense that this whole chapter has kind of been an interrogation of Hayt by Alia, but it's almost working the other way around. It's almost get the sense maybe that things are being reflected back onto Alia, maybe because of these metallic eyes, if you like, to push the point a wee bit, but to labour it a wee bit. But it kind of her anger and her probing at this has revealed, I suppose, an aspect of Hayt's character. And it's also made her realize her feelings towards him. And I think that's possibly what's getting in the way, what's making her angry, call people primitives and things and stuff like that, is just probably the world of emotions and hormones and all of this kind of stuff that she has to deal with. Your truth, that's what's dangerous. You return to the ways of wisdom. Amenhotep could not have stated the matter more directly. Now, back to the matter at hand. What is it you saw in the desert? I suppose. What Alia saw in the desert is this. We're told she grabbed his arm, forcing him to a halt. He'd done it again, shocked her mind into sharpened awareness. I can't explain it, but I keep thinking of the face dancers. Why is that? That is why your brother sent you to the desert, he said, nodding. Tell him of this persistent thought. And Alia says, but why? She shook her head. Why face dancers? And I think this is quite revealing. There's a young woman dead out there, he said. So we're back to where we were at the start. Perhaps no young woman is reported missing among the Fremen. I suppose that's the really interesting. But if the thing, simply put, is that if a Fremen was missing, they know about it. The fact, so it's more the thing that's not happened, isn't it? I suppose no one has reported a woman missing amongst the Fremen, and if that's the case, and we have face dancers, and they've got a body here without a face and hands and upper torso, then very much we could assume that they've replaced the victim. Someone missing would probably be noticed. And I suppose, arguably, a Samuta addicted Fremen woman would also be a thing of note. Yeah, and there we go. That's where we hit the end of that chapter, folks. It's a pretty interesting. It was very dialogue heavy. And it's just, as I was reading it, I was just going, my goodness, there's Oedipal stuff here, isn't it? I really need to think of Alia as stuff that I do all the time, but just hadn't. I was that busy focusing on, I suppose, the Oedipal aspects of Paul that I forget that the two of them are a Janus aspect. That they're a syzygy as well. That they're almost one and the same thing. They're a male and female aspect of the same character, done in different ways. And I think in some ways Alia's on her hero's journey, but maybe in a different place, or maybe that she's in the same place as Paul. But there's food for thought. She's a very young woman. She's got a lot of blood on her hands, to be honest with you. And as does Paul, and as maybe, we were talking about the unexamined life not being worth living. Have the Atreides children been so absorbed in oracular vision and looking for the future, trying to make sense out of it all, that they fail to kind of look back to where they've come from? They're maybe not even aware of what they're doing. And we will get this sense, I suppose, with the two of them, that they rely so much on their oracular vision. Maybe the fact with Hayt and his metallic eyes reflecting back on them, I suppose, in some sense, is going to show them the obvious in some ways. The more they use the oracular vision, the less and less they can see perhaps the real world, Ah, dear, oh dear. Oh, how are we doing for time? Yeah, I tend that actually was a bit lengthy, because whenever we do chapters that are dialogue heavy, I think, as I said the last time, we tend to run through them quite quickly, and I didn't think I really had too much food for thought out of this one, but it really did sort of get me thinking about Oedipus in terms of Alia. It was the speech about knowing her father and mother, and then the thing that really just kind of just pinged me was you speak in riddles, that little thing. And there's a few wee things in here. I suppose the gift from the Fremen Naives of Korba. Why would you give a dangerous gift like that? Well, not a dangerous gift, sorry. Why would you give such an obsequious gift to a sycophantic thing to Paul? Especially when you kind of consider that I'd imagine that Paul had the respect of the Fremen Naives, certainly in Dune. And is it something that's happened within the last 12 years? As I said, we talk about within Lord Raglan's, and it's already been mentioned, by the way. So steps 14, 15, and 16. For a time he reigns uneventfully, and 15 is prescribes laws rules, judges, etc. But 16 later, he loses favor with the gods and/or his subjects, and we're sort of seeing a bit of that already with the Atreides, and of course later on leaves the throne or city. It's all coming up basically, I think. But there we go. Let me just catch up with your comments, folks. Oh, you're heading off, Cynthia. That's just your comment at the end of it. I'll catch up. But Cynthia saying I have to go now. Thanks as always. No problem, Cynthia. Take it easy. And thank you very much for joining us as always. Carlos was in backing up there a wee bit. Carlos says, does Herbert's use of the feudal system suggest that he feels the democratic system limits the effectiveness of government on a galactic scale? I was thinking about the feudal system. The effectiveness of government. It's a very good question, Carlos. One of the things I thought about with the whole Atreides thing is, well, I suppose the question is, where was Frank going with this book, with the Dune series for book 7? And of course, we have this feudalism, and I'm not sure where this comes from, but as my understanding is that there was a strong, and it's possibly from some of Frank's notes, there was a strong tendency to want where the Dune series would end. It would be with Paul, with whoever's running the show at that time. Sorry, establishing some kind of form of democracy. I don't think he feels that the democratic system limits the effectiveness of government on a galactic scale. I don't see how feudalism would help really much, except for things like farming and war and stuff. I think feudalism is a thing that's kind of, I suppose, I wonder how many countries today would be considered feudal. If any, I doubt it very much. Well, technically Britain. Duh, I suppose. I just thinking we've got a royal family and so on. But no, it's basically everyone in their place, that kind of thing. Classic definition of feudalism describes a set of reciprocal legal and military obligations of the warrior nobility, and revolves around the key concepts of lords, vassals, and fiefs. A broader definition, as described by Mark Bloch, 1939, includes not only the obligations of the warrior nobility, but the obligations of all three estates of the realm: the nobility, the clergy, and the peasantry, all of whom were bound by a system of manorialism that is sometimes referred to as a feudal society. Yeah, manorialism is also known as senioralism, the manor system, or a manorial system, method of land ownership in parts of Europe, notably France and later England during the medieval period, Middle Ages. There we go. Although it's derived from the Latin word feudum or feudum, which is a fief, which was used during the medieval period, the term feudalism and the system it describes were not conceived of as a formal political system by the people who lived during the Middle Ages. There you go. They didn't know what it was. Goodness, I was just wondering, is there a modern feudal society? There probably is. Sorry, back to the point, Carlos, was that the story of the Atreides, if you like, ends in, oddly enough, we were just saying that with Raglan, it ends in drama, if you like, in the plays of the ancient Greeks. And the end of, I suppose, all of that story is that family upon family homicide, and the cyclical reiterative pattern that's constantly there with the Atreides, is that it does require a kind of deus ex machina in the goddess Athena, who sets up a court and casts a deciding vote. She turns the Furies into the Eumenides, which are kind of the kindly ones, to look over and be guardians of Athens, and it's kind of the beginning. This a strong suggestion is within the play that it links the Atreides myth, etc., to the foundations of democracy in Athens. So whether that's the case or whether he felt the demos, I think that's where he was going ultimately, Carlos, if you see what I mean. But a feudal system, I suppose, if you think about it, is tidy in that sense. Order is the other thing we were talking about there today. It's a very good question. And I wouldn't know how to answer it, but I think that I think he might disagree. I think that he would want to go towards a democratic system. And if we think about what particularly with what the epigraph from the previous chapter about the guild, our goal is not to rule, but to tap these gene pools to learn and to free ourselves from all restraints imposed by dependency and government. I don't know. I honestly don't think feudalism would work particularly well on a galactic scale. But who's to say? But imperialism, possibly, But I would imagine democracy, and I would still see the fact that I think that most planets would have to deal with their own problems, if you see what I mean. Cynthia's comment there, it seems that Alia is just starting to realize that the face dancers are potentially dangerous. Why only now? It's a good question. I was thinking about that myself. She and Paul have not been curious enough about their rivals. We don't really see the face dancers, the Tleilax, at all in the first book. And I suppose the question becomes, if the face dancers have been around for ages, Sootpot asked me a wee question, I think, a wee while back in a comment about it was my comment as we read Dune Messiah, there's a point where we're told that the Tleilax have broken the Sook doctors, if you see what I mean. They knew how to break the Sook doctors' conditioning. It was a little sentence dropped in there, and it made me ask the question: why did Frank put that there at all? Because it seems to contradict everything that we know about Dr. Yueh, about the Harkonnens, and about the Sook conditioning and how it's broken. And it kind of almost made me ask: was Dr. Yueh a Tleilaxu, Gola? And it was the line that Frank had put into Dune Messiah that made me ask it. I think Sootpot had pointed out I don't think so, and I didn't think so either. Why would you put one sentence in Ladies Behave? Sorry about that. Why would you put one sentence into your book that contradicts almost everything in the major setup of Dune? Sorry, the ladies behave. Ladies are barking away there. So the question becomes, how long have how long has face dancer technology been around? We're informed that the Tleilax had their own Kwisatz Haderach, and we're told what happened to him, but we weren't told when they had this Kwisatz Haderach. And the question could become, did they have a Kwisatz Haderach before Paul became a Kwisatz Haderach? When did the Tleilax Kwisatz Haderach exist, and when did it die? If you see what I mean. Yeah. And the idea that the Tleilax are dirty, disgusting, all of that is an idea that's put out by the Tleilax. The guild can buy it, they have golas, they have all sorts. So it's a very good question. And if the Tleilax have been up to what they're up to, I suppose, why haven't they replaced all sorts of people long before this, if you see what I mean? Or maybe, and I suppose this is the interesting thing about it, is that within Dune, I like to go that the major theme of Dune is evolution. But it's not just people who evolve within Dune. It's their technology that evolves as well, and their ideas. And often, the thing that Frank likes to point out is that the people who are involved with these things, like the Bene Gesserit, for example, are ignorant of their own place within their reading program. They're not able to examine themselves, I suppose, in light of this. And therefore, I suppose it makes that quotation about the unexamined life not being worth living. I never quite agreed with it. I thought life is worth living whether you examined it or not. But if you see what I mean. But yeah, it makes it kind of more pertinent, doesn't it? There you go. But yeah, the face dancers. There are great plot holes in Dune, or little paradoxes, if you like. And it's kind of things that we tend to think about in hindsight. It's, for example, that if we've got through God Emperor, you realize there should be a moment for you where you realize that the universe has been placed under this tyrannical monster's yoke, and then he's going to explain why he's done this, etc. But there's all sorts of attempts to kill this guy, las guns and stuff. But all you need to kill the God Emperor is a super soaker, a water pistol, and nobody ever figures this out. And if it's one of the things that you have to talk about, I suppose, within Dune, is the flaws of all the human beings, or and again, can we consider everybody in the Dune universe technically human? But regardless of their skills, their training that they fall upon, that most of them are actually, most of the characters in this series are fallible, as they should be, I suppose, and that's part of I suppose part of our hero worship of Paul, Atreides, and Alia, etc. But it seems to apply to the leaders of various groups, if you like. I was trying to remember the Skytail. Oh no, Talaxi Master's name, is it Wheatcraft or something like that? The Reverend Mother Gaius Hel Mohiam is not on top of things as much as we'd like to think, and again is quite fallible. The Emperor's and even the Baron and so on. All of these, no matter how deadly or dangerous they are, no matter what their abilities, they're human. Are they human? I suppose, but they're fallible and they're mortal. I suppose the question of whether they're human or not is, they're different than us, I suppose. Put it that way. I often sort of ask this question, because there's a point in the book, it's explained to you the physical differences between the Fremen and other humans, and it's to do with the length of their intestines, and it's actually what we call a soft inheritance thing within Dune. As much as we talk about Erewhon and what do you call it, Vril of the Coming Race by Edward Bulwer Lytton. Edward Bulwer Lytton. That's it. Sorry. Which would kind of explore the differences between Darwinian evolution and Lamarckian evolution, or what's called soft inheritance. So the fact the Fremen, you can say, have an evolutionary difference than humans, like than Homo sapiens, then you can say that the Fremen are we're normal humans would be an ancestor of the Fremen, if you like. They have a slight physical difference, and it's just a little one, but it's there, and it's to do with, I suppose, being on the planet, water, etc. But how much does life on other planets affect human evolution? And within the universe, we don't. The only kind of alien thing I think we can really consider is the worm. And whereas the worm, my own opinion is that the worm is part animal, part plant. My own personal belief is that the worm comes from a lab on Earth. Might ask the question, what happened to Earth? But I know kind of Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson kind of answer a lot of these questions. Not that I've gone that far into it, but yeah, I think it's always nice to speculate. But there we go. So yeah, there we are. Another chapter through, folks. We're pretty much hitting. I think we've hit about the middle of the book. Let me see. In terms of my copy, Yeah, pretty much right around the middle, a few pages off. So we're doing well. That was a reasonably lengthy chapter with an awful lot of dialogue. So I'm hoping for something a bit easier next time, but with more stuff to chat about. But there we go. There's loads of Dune stuff up at the minute, by the way. As I was saying, I've been checking out some of it. Interviews with Denis Villeneuve, etc., the cast, and I think there's the first six minutes or so of the new Dune movie is up and about. So lots of stuff for Dune fans. And if anybody's missed a couple of episodes, we've posted a whole bunch of stuff on our community page on YouTube. That's the main way we can communicate these days. But we put up some a link to archive at the University of California, Fullerton, I think, with lots of Frank Herbert Dune stuff there. We put it includes the audio files as well, by the way, that we put up the previous week. So if anybody's interested, we've been putting some stuff up in the community section of the YouTube channel there that will lead you to all sorts of Frank Herberty Dune stuff. So there we go. Well, I'm going to say all the very best now, folks, and say good night. I'm off to my dentist again tomorrow. Whole bunch of appointments over the next month. So fun as always. Been an interesting chat. Some real food for thought here. And as I said, if anybody wants to read into the Oedipus myth, you can read it. I suppose it would take you a few hours to read the three plays by Sophocles if you wanted. But what you got from Apollodorus there was a fair bit of it. And we'll see if we can dig up a few bits of a few more pieces on Oedipus and have a wee chat about it. But if anybody wants to see how Paul overlays onto it, if you go to my videos on the PhD, it's in the chapter on the hero. It'll be either the first or second episode, I think. We go through Raglan's list, and then we go through Paul Atreides and how we actually state all the things that he fits into Raglan's 22 ritualistic steps. And so we point out that there's 19 of them that attribute to Paul Atreides. Yeah. That's a great wee book, by the way, as I said. The mythological figures and historical figures that he looks at, by the way, I'll just tell you very quickly. Oedipus is the only one that scores 22. There are 22 steps on Raglan's list. Theseus, king of Athens, scores 20. Romulus gets 18. Heracles, 17. Perseus, 18. Jason, 15. Excuse me. Bellerophon gets 16. Pelops, 13. I could probably go through that. I might think Pelops might score higher. Asclepios scores 12. Dionysus, 19. So Dionysus would score the same as Paul Atreides. Apollo, the god, only scores 11. Zeus scores 15. Excuse me. Who have we got? Joseph scores 12. Moses scores 20. And it says actually Moses, quite interesting, several of them twice, or if we include Josephus's account, even 3 times. Elijah scores 9 points. Watu Gunning, where are we? Story given by Sir Stamford Raffles, incomplete. 18 points. It's one that's mentioned for its resemblance to the Oedipus myth, by the way. Yi Kang scores 14. Sigurd or Siegfried scores 11. Lou Logos, I'm never pronouncing that correctly. Scores 17. Welsh hero. King Arthur scores 19, same as Paul Atreides. And again, another character, excuse me, that Paul Atreides is based heavily on. And then, of course, we've got Robin Hood with 13. At the end, it just says, interestingly enough, I suppose it says at the end of these are the heroes that Raglan has run through. Just at the end of his little list, he says, Cuchulainn also scores a good number of points. It's interesting to compare these heroes of myth with Hengist, who makes a journey, wins a victory, and becomes a king, but otherwise is not allowed to have done anything which brings him within the pattern excuse me, the story of Hengist, as I've tried to show, is not myth but pseudo history. It may be added that although several of the incidents are such as have happened to many historical heroes, yet I have not found an undoubtedly historical hero to whom more than 6 points can be awarded, or perhaps 7 in the case of Alexander the Great. Alexander is, of course, historical, and there's a bunch of the characters in this that he mentions that I have to say are historical and not mythical. Differences between the hero of myth and the hero of history will emerge from our discussion of the significance of the pattern, which had better be left to another chapter. There you go. A little bit of raglan on that. Always interesting, But we're just coming up to midnight, folks. So we've been on for 3 hours, and I think one person is still there listening. So I'll thank you very much for your patience, and I'll say we'll be on hopefully next week with the next chapter at the same time. And it's less than 2 weeks to see. Is it 2 weeks probably to see June? So looking forward to that, hopefully. And so there we go, folks. Enjoy all your June lore and stuff that's out there at the minute. I hope you're digging it. And I'll say good night till next week. So all the very best, folks. Take it easy wherever you are. Look after yourselves, and all the very best. Good night.